Chapter 129. But he still tries to finish the last part. He is silent for a while, cooperating with the sadness of this big demon. He doesn't know why he is so sad. Maybe it's because this demon is a different species and born to be sentimental. Or maybe sometimes, demons are actually simpler and more sensitive than humans. He suddenly remembers that night when the 9th young master looked at him and talked to him before he died. The mist rose from his nostrils and ears. At that time he thought he was angry. After a few seconds, Lord Dongting suddenly stretches out a shiny hand from the mist and waves to Zhou Xian. The layer of water light on the cultivator retracts as if it has merged into his body. Zhou Xian wakes up and yells as soon as he opens his eyes, "I don't know everything about what Lu Ling did." But Lord Dongting doesn't seem to want to listen to this cultivator anymore. With another wave of his hand, a gust of demonic wind rose from the flat ground, carrying Li Yunxin, Zhou Yunzi, Ding Zhao and Sun, the three of them, through the window of the main hall straight down the mountain. After a breath of time, the 5 of them were already in a dense forest. Looking at the distance, they see Dongting in the night and the smell of water. The 3 mortals are so scared that they can't speak. They are still trembling on the ground as if they will fall from the sky if they stand up. Li Yunxin glances at them and says in a low voice, "If you don't leave now, you will die. If you want to live, don't talk about what happened today." Seeing that the legs of the 3 people are still weak, he snorts and waves his sleeves. Another gust of demon wind rises and rolls the 3 people into the lake. After being stimulated by the cold water, the 3 people finally wake up. They cry and paddle in the water. Their voices can be heard far in the night. After finishing these things, Li Yunxin turns to look at Zhou Yunzi standing opposite. This cultivator of the school seems to be very surprised. He can't believe that Lord Dongting put him down the mountain like this. He even closes his eyes slightly and feels the wacken flowing in his body for a while. Then he suddenly shows a cruel smile in the night. Then he said, "Brat, your time of death has come." Li Yunxin blinked. Do you think that the Lord Dongting has placed a restriction on me and imprisoned my magic power?" Zhou Yunzi slowly reached his hand into his sleeve as if he was searching for something. "Idiot. He injected demonic energy into me and temporarily increased my power. Hee. It seems like he doesn't completely believe your words." You see, how am I going to teach you a lesson, you little bastard?" As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled out his hand from his sleeve and flung it towards Li Yunxin. With a loud bang, flames rose in front of Li Yunxin. "Damn it." Li Yunxin cursed in a low voice and turned to run. But he didn't use his demon power or magic. He just ran to the other side of the shore. Mount June is in the Dongting Lake, but it is actually a peninsula separated from the mainland by the lake water. Therefore, the distance between Mount June and the shore of Dongting Lake is not far. People who are good at swimming can reach the other side in 10 minutes. On this side of Mount June Island, you can even hear the shouts of people on the other side. Li Yunxin ran at a speed that Zhou Yunzi could just keep up with. The cultivator chased after him. Although Danding School of Xianxia is Daotong, it seems to have a unique personal ability. At least Li Yunxin now feels that Zhou Yunzi is a mobile arsenal. He continuously took out bullets from his sleeve and threw them at himself. Occasionally he would put 1 or 2 into his mouth. It's very unhygienic. Li Yunxin ran to the shore. He could jump into the water or use his holy spell to cross the river, but he didn't do so. He was just like a person who was really anxious but didn't dare to go into the water. He ran with Zhou Yunzi for a while before he finally saw a small sampan half submerged in the water in a field of acorns. Then he jumped on the sampan, exerted his strength, stood on it and went straight to the other side. Zhou Yunzi chased after him all the way and kept cursing. At this time, seeing that he ran away, he scolded him even more, scolding him for being afraid of water and death. He would be tortured to death later. He scolded but didn't stop. He took out a figure from his sleeve which looked like a treasure bag, dipped it in saliva and pressed it on his forehead. Then he jumped into the water and continued to chase after Li Yunxin. The sampan soon reached the other side. Li Yunxin abandoned the boat and went ashore. He went straight into the woods on the shore. The feeling disappeared. The faint feeling of being shrouded by the monster power of Lord Dongting on Mount June just now disappeared. Zhou Yunzi followed him into the woods and scolded even louder. As soon as he saw Li Yunxin, he pounced on him. "You lonely ghost, where are you going?" Li Yunxin raised his hand and slapped him. Song Yunzi's words were immediately pulled back and 2 front teeth flew out of his mouth. "Shut up, idiot." Li Yunxin slapped him to the ground and didn't look at him. Instead he walked 2 steps out of the woods. He frowned slightly and looked at Mount June in the distance to make sure that he was completely free from the monitoring of Lord Dongting's monster power. Song Yunzi was dizzy on the ground for a while before he woke up. He couldn't accept this sudden change. But soon he tried to get up from the ground and wanted to take out more bullets from his sleeve. But Li Yunxin had already walked back into the woods. He kicked him again. "Tell me what's wrong with Lu Ling's Dharma body?" Song Yunzi was an emptiness state cultivator. He had tempered his spirit and body with the divine heart technique for dozens of years. The so-called first-class masters in the secular world were nothing in his eyes. He could stand there and let his opponent hit him, but he couldn't be hurt at all. Moreover, the divine heart technique was a brilliant righteous path that was most effective against ghost cultivators. But this kind of body was kicked by Li Yunxin until he couldn't move. Song Yunzi didn't understand what was going on. Lord Dongting had clearly given him some monster power, and he was even stronger than usual. But Li Yunxin knew what was going on. He picked a smooth big green stone and sat down. He sighed and scolded in a low voice. "Damn demon. Judging from the short contact just now, Mr. Dongting is the most human-like demon he has ever seen." Although his real face was still strange, he could feel sadness, nervousness, and excitement. He would even invite people to a banquet, although he would eat human flesh. For a moment he felt that a powerful demon like Dongting Jun, who has lived for thousands of years, could be called a human being. Until just now. That demon was sincerely sad for the death of the 9th young master, and at the same time he injected some monster power into Song Yunzi. Then he sent both of them down the mountain. He just wanted them to fight and kill each other. This demon might believe what Li Yunxin said was true, but he was still a little suspicious. He didn't care about the fact that he was Little Nine's best friend. If he died, so be it. Demon's sadness was focused and single-minded. He was only sad for Little Nine, and it had nothing to do with other things. Maybe Li Yunxin would kill Song Yunzi. Then he didn't care, he was only a little suspicious, anyway. In essence, he looked like a human, but he still wouldn't see a human as a human. Song Yunzi didn't know what he was thinking. He was still immersed in his little world of surprise and despair. Until Li Yunxin asked him again, the cultivator said, "But you are already dead." He shouted in disbelief, "You are just a wild ghost for a few days." Li Yunxin sighed again, stood up, walked over and smashed his head with one palm. "You are AF * King Wild Ghost. I am Wei River Dragon King." The headless body of the Taoist priest swayed for a while and fell to the ground, blood gushing out. Li Yunxin reached out again and grabbed Song Yunzi's ghost, holding it in his hand to stop it from leaving. This ghost retained his obsession before death and only screamed mournfully, "Only a few days. Only a few days." Li Yunxin ignored him, but returned to sit on the big blue stone and waited patiently. *****, note, Yin God. Ghost cultivators, animals that become spirits, demons and mythological beasts born from the yin and yang of the sky can all be called Yin God. Chapter 130. It was just nightfall. There was a breeze and water vapor. The smell in the forest was also pleasant. Of course only for Li Yunxin. Many of the smells that he liked in the past had not changed, but now there were more. For example, the sweet smell of the blood from the Taoist's body was very pleasant. Mixed with the fragrance of the grass, there was a feeling of peace and comfort. If he looked into the distance, he could vaguely see the lights on Egret Island. He did not know if the 3 people swam back. But soon the night fog rose. The lights on Egret Island were hidden in the fog. Mount June was also faintly visible in the fog. There was a faint light on the top of the mountain. It should be the back hall of the School of the Emperor Star. The moonlight was bright and the scene in front of him was beautiful and quiet. It was hard to imagine that in such a beautiful scene, there were several big demons who liked to eat human flesh. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, Li Yunxin looked away. The person he was looking for was here. He glanced at the person who was 2 steps away from him and exclaimed, "Why is it you? Is this guy a good guy?" Bai Yanjun walked a few steps in front of him without making a sound. He looked at Li Yunxin for a while, clapped his hands and said in a high-pitched voice, "Good, good. This method is really effective." Li Yunxin thought for a while and said, "If I understand correctly, you mean, You did it after all. Bai Yanjun did not care and changed the topic without any apology. You caught the Taoist soul waiting for me to come? Li Yunxin stared at him for a while without any expression and said nothing. He was probably the first person in the world to ignore Bai Yanjun's question. After a few seconds of awkward deadlock, Bai Yanjun waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I happen to have something to talk to you about, so I won't argue with you. Tell me, why are you looking for me?" Li Yunxin still did not speak and only stared at him. Bai Yanjun was a little angry. "You really don't know what's good for you. What else do you want? If you don't say anything, I'm leaving. I'll leave this Taoist priest's soul to you." Li Yunxin laughed. "Look at you, a dignified Yama lord, but you're acting like a child. I was just admiring your tongue. How could I not speak? Then don't be angry, don't be angry. Can you do me a favor? I want to know something from this Taoist priest, but I'm too lazy to interrogate him by torture. Please help me." Bai Yanjun looked at Li Yunxin and pretended to tap his forehead with his finger. After 3 to 4 times he said, "You little brat, now that you've seized Dragon Sun's body, you actually dare to make fun of me." Li Yunxin spread his hands. "We're already sworn brothers. There's no need to be so formal." Bai Yanjun shook his head. "Humph, only women and villains are hard to raise. You too." After sighing with emotion, he hesitated for a moment before walking in front of Tsong Yunzi's soul. When this soul saw the Yama Lord, he seemed to know that it was time to go on his way, so he stopped making noise. This time Bai Yanjun stretched out his hand and tapped his forehead. "What do you want to ask?" Li Yunxin thought for a moment. "To be honest, I want to know everything in his mind." Bai Yanjun rolled his eyes at him. "You're dreaming. Then, let's talk about what happens after I die." Bai Yanjun seemed to be surprised that he suddenly lowered his standards, but he did not say anything. He only reached into the chest of the Taoist priest's soul and took out a ball of green light, just like when Li Yunxin first saw him in his dream. Then he threw the green light at Li Yunxin and it disappeared into his body. After waiting for a breath, he asked, "Are you satisfied?" Li Yunxin's expression changed. After a while he let out a long sigh. "Thank you. Then let's talk about me." Bai Yanjun pulled out a metal chain from his sleeve and locked the Taoist priest's soul as he spoke. "Do you know how I take the souls of many people in this world?" But Li Yunxin seemed to have something else on his mind. He only replied casually, "Oh, I don't know. Tell me about it." Bai Yanjun did not mind. He only said, "There are some important people who can affect the world, for example the Emperor of Li Kingdom. I have to take him myself. The Li Kingdom is vast and has a large population. If the Emperor of Li Kingdom dies, the news will spread too fast and it will be taken too late. His soul will be blessed by the wishes of millions of people, and in the blink of an eye he will become a powerful ghost king. This is the power that can affect the world. Similarly, I have to take care of the emperors and dignitaries of the various countries personally. Although I can have thousands of incarnations, there is still a limit. And I have 2 kinds of incarnations. One is like this one today. I can talk to you and act according to the situation just like my original self. As for the other kind, I can only take people, just puppets. The ordinary people and the unimportant ones are taken by my incarnations." At this point Li Yunxin was indeed a little interested. "Then that night in the city of Wei, the day I met you for the first time outside the city. Why did you come in person? Just listen to me. Why do you have so many questions?" Bai Yanjun rolled his eyes at him again. Li Yunxin knew that his question had touched on something important that he did not want to answer. Or perhaps it made this Bai Yanjun feel awkward again. There are also some people who have some influence but are not that important. It is not good to waste the energy of my incarnations to take them, and it is easy to make mistakes with the puppet incarnations. So I need someone to do it for me. This person is the judge of the Yang world. Bai Yanjun nodded at Li Yunxin. "For example, you are a great demon in the Wei River. You have gained intelligence, know some things and have demon spells to hide your traces. So you can be the judge of the Yang world." After saying this, he paused for a while as if he was waiting for Li Yunxin's reaction. Sure enough, Li Yunxin was neither excited nor happy. Instead, he was afraid that he would harm him. He frowned and thought for a while before saying, "Why don't you find someone to do it? For example, a Taoist priest? You can also teach them some spells. A demon is a demon after all. Humans are not as good as demons to do this kind of thing." Bai Yanjun sneered. "You think I have never tried humans? However, that person loves to bend the law for personal gain and abuse his power for personal gain. In the end, the world is in a foul atmosphere. You are talking about demons. Although demons are cruel, they have gained intelligence and are trained well, so they are more useful than humans. In their eyes, humans are the same as pigs and dogs. They won't do such dirty things like humans. They don't have any gossips. Li Yunxin frowned. I don't like what you are saying. How can humans be pigs and dogs? Even a demon would have to take human form, right? Besides, the Dragon King, was also a human. How can you not worry about me? Demons take human form because the meridians of a human form are the easiest to use spells. But apart from cultivators, normal people will die with a touch, and even a small hole in their body won't live. How do you think demons see them? You say demons like to eat humans. Let me ask you, in your Qing kingdom, what kind of animal is the easiest to find and hunt? Isn't it humans? They don't know how to dig holes and they don't like to dive. As for you. Bai Yanjun suddenly laughed shrilly and pointed at Li Yunxin as if he found it very funny. You are such a treacherous, cunning and heartless person. How can I not be at ease? Hearing this, Li Yunxin stared at him for a while. He seemed to want to say something but was speechless. After watching the White Hell Lord laugh for a while, he suddenly laughed as well. He closed his eyes for a while, then opened them again. Good, good, good. Please continue. Chapter 131. Bai Yanjun looked at him and shook his head slightly. He seemed to think that Li Changshuo's idea was ridiculous. But he quickly said, therefore, the position of judge of the Yang world can be given to you in the Wei River. There are some people that you took from me. Although I can't give you any benefits now, you won't lose out in the future. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Why not Lord Dongting? The answer was as he expected. I can order whoever I want to do it. Why must it be him? Li Yunxin sighed. Fine. Sounds good, although you might still be tricking me. But I can try. Give me the book. Bai Yanjun frowned. When did I promise you anything? Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows in surprise. The Book of Life and Death? The Book of Merits and Virtues? Don't you have such a thing? Remembering people's lifespan and good deeds. Without that, how can I carry out my work? Hearing this, Bai Yanjun was stunned for a while. Then he suddenly laughed wildly. His long tongue trembled like a red silk in the wind. He seemed to really find it funny, so much so that his figure was a bit blurry and his outline was flickering. Li Yunxin sat quietly on the green stone and watched him laugh. After Bai Yanjun laughed for a quarter of an hour, he finally stopped and pointed at Li Yunxin. You devil, oh ha! Do you really think there's a book of life and death or a book of merits and virtues? For that mortal. Li Yunxin said calmly. When I first saw you in my dream, I saw you too take out a small book and say that I wasn't on it. If you want to say that, it's barely a book of life and death. Bai Yanjun seemed to want to laugh again. But how many people can be recorded in such a small book? Do you really think it's a treasure? Let me tell you now, there are only those emperors, ministers and literary giants I mentioned before in the book. Afraid that he would make a mistake, he used this notebook to record it. If you notice that one day that person is about to die or has already died, you will quickly collect his soul. Discovered? Dying or already dead? Li Yunxin interrupted him. What do you mean? Bai Yanjun found it even more hilarious. You demonic human, do you really believe in life and death? You're the same as those ignorant mortals. Do you really think that I have a book in my hands that records how many months and days people die, how many good and bad things they've done in this life, and whether they reincarnate as humans or animals? Li Yunxin looked at him calmly. Of course not. Doesn't that mean that there are people who do bad things in this life and enjoy glory and splendor and wealth, but there will be no retribution in the next life? Some people do good deeds in this life but end up in a miserable state, and they don't have any good fortune in their next life? Bai Yanjun giggled. Of course not, of course not. He seemed to be very happy as he stroked his long tongue. Rather, some people do bad things in this life and enjoy glory and splendor and wealth, and they want to enjoy that glory and splendor even more in their next life. Some people do good deeds in this life and end up in a miserable state, and they want to continue doing good deeds in their next life. Hearing this, Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then he raised his head and asked, You're not joking with me? Bai Yanjun stared at him mockingly. I'm not in the mood for that. It was unknown what Li Yunxin was thinking, but he was silent for a long time before he said, Can you tell me? I really want to know. Your reaction is quite interesting. Bai Yanjun circled around him and suddenly leaned close to him. I thought you, demonic human, would clap your hands in joy when you find out about this. Li Yunxin didn't say anything. Seeing him like this, Bai Yanjun straightened up. Then I'll tell you. But after I tell you, you'll have to become a judge of the Yang world. If you know about these things and still want to shirk responsibility, I'll really have to deal with you. Fine. Then listen carefully. I'm in charge of matters of life and death, but I'm not only in charge of matters of life and death. Whether a person does good or bad, good or evil, they're just minor details. The most important thing is to see what kind of impact they have on this world. For example, an evil person was born in troubled times. When he was young, he ran amok in the countryside, harming the common people. When he was young, he raped and pillaged, becoming a tyrant in the marketplace. When he was middle-aged, this evil person gathered a group of bandits in the mountains and forests to rob pedestrians. Later he slowly gained power and began to fight for the throne. In the end, this person became the emperor. He cruelly slaughtered the loyal and good people, levied taxes and collected exorbitant taxes. He could be considered an evil person. But he ended the troubled times and allowed the common people to begin to recuperate. This is a great merit. I don't care about how many good people he harmed. As long as he can increase the number of people in this world, it's useful. With such a person's luck, he came to hell after his death to be reincarnated. He already has the luck to be a good person and an emperor, so he's naturally more skilled than the average person. Do you think I should ask him to join the emperor's family? For example, there are some people who are even more thoroughly evil. They're born into the ranks of officials and nobles, but they only know how to prey on the common people and corrupt the laws of the court. They truly don't have the slightest bit of benefit to this world. But at this time, when he's already at the end of his life, he still needs such a person to do evil after his death. Who else could be more skilled than him? Naturally, he'd still have to join the official's family. Li Yunxin listened quietly and his expression was inscrutable. After a moment of thought, he asked calmly, in other words, when a person's soul is reincarnated, their memories are erased and they're reincarnated again. Some things can't be erased cleanly. It'll be easier to reincarnate with this kind of imprint and do the same thing. Bai Yanjun nodded. That's exactly it. Then, why not let a good person do it? Li Yunxin asked. There must be someone who's capable but not so bad. Bai Yanjun blinked. How powerful do you think I am? There are so many variables in this world. How do you know which small thing will affect the overall situation? What I can do is only to check the direction and luck of a certain place at a certain time. Then I'll use this luck to guide it. For example, that evil person just now. It's not like I want him to be the emperor. He's lucky and has already conquered a piece of land. Among the people who are vying for the throne, he's the most likely to succeed. Do you think I should waste my energy to support another person? Even if this matter is done, there are many things in this world. Just looking at the direction and luck of the situation is enough to exhaust my magical power. How can I have the time to care about whether he's a good person or an evil person? Li Yunxin sighed slightly. So that's how it is. So that person's death, it's indeed you who wants him to die. You may think that the general trend has reached a certain point and he should die. Most of the time, it's just that when he dies you go and get the soul. Exactly. Li Yunxin stood up and stroked the bamboo fan in his hand. He looked into the distance for a while. No one knew what he was looking at. Then he said in a low voice, so in this world there's really no good or evil or justice? At this time Bai Yanjun seemed to be really curious. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while and then asked, do you really care about those things? Li Yunxin pursed his lips and walked 2 steps to the edge of the woods. With one hand behind his back he looked at the Dongting Lake in the distance. After watching for a while in the mist, he turned around and smiled. My friend, I think you may have some misunderstandings about me. The night was heavy. His hair and long eyelashes were stained with tiny droplets of water, making him look damp and cold. He thought for a while and seemed to be organizing his words. After a while he said, I already knew what the world was like. There is no benevolence, justice or morality in this world. Not to mention benevolence, justice or morality, there is no good or evil, justice or fairness. For example, this Qing state or later people became more powerful and made a United States a federal state or a republic. When you walk on the road you can see officers. If someone does something bad he will be arrested. Then he will be judged and punished. When you walk in the school, you can hear the teachers talking about morality and justice. You also know that the world is in good order. But in essence, where do those people have the power to punish those who do bad things? They rob. When they rob and succeed, no one punishes them. When the emperor of a country or the court does something very bad, no one punishes them. If they are bad enough and strong enough, they can always get away with it. In this world, there is indeed justice in some details. But in most parts, in essence, there is no justice. It's the naked, dark world of the jackal. All justice and justice are built on plunder and power. I have heard a saying before, there is no good fruit on a poisonous tree. But this real world is indeed an abnormal existence. On the rotten soil there is a seemingly sweet fruit. Bai Yanjun listened to him and could not help but clap his hands in praise. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You are a rare person who understands. No wonder. Li Yunxin laughed and shook his head, interrupting him. I haven't finished. Since I know this truth, then I also understand some other things. The distinction between good and evil, justice and justice in this world, is extremely important. Some fools think that this world is like this and there is no need for order or morality. Not only do they do bad things, but they also snort at justice and justice while doing it. This kind of person, even if I meet him, I will kill him. You want to ask me why? Because he will not let me live well. That emperor, that noble official do not know the essence of this world. But they insist that people believe in benevolence, righteousness and morality, because such things do not exist. If people do not even believe in it, the world will be in chaos. They also have to spend more effort to suppress and pacify people so that they can live happily. Those nobles have the capital to suppress and pacify people, to protect themselves in the chaos, but they still have to pretend. Those evil people among the commoners. Once everyone is like him, not afraid of any order or morality, the world will be in chaos. How can he get any benefits? How can he live? Maybe the person he ridiculed as old-fashioned and stupid will be the first to kill him. This kind of person benefits from order and morality, but does not know it. Instead, he will be ridiculed by those who think they are smart. That is evil and stupid. I hate stupid people more than evil people. I kill one when I see one. Bai Yanjun frowned slightly. Hey, what do you want to say? Li Yunxin reached out to wipe the dew on his temples, smiling faintly. It is just that after listening to what you said, I felt a little emotional. Because I always felt that there is no retribution in this world. Maybe there will be after death. Now that I know that there will be no retribution after death, I feel that this world is really dark. It makes people feel a little desperate. But the main reason is to tell you clearly what will happen next. If you want to be a judge of my world, I can do it. But I realize that you seem to have some misunderstanding about me. Maybe you still want to plot something from me, so I have to make it clear in advance so that we will not be embarrassed in the future. It will not be good to be friends. Bai Yanjun seemed to be so angry that he wanted to laugh. Friend? You are the first person who dares to talk to me like this. I want to hear, what do you want to say? What did I misunderstand you? You said that I am sinister, cunning and heartless. Li Yunxin stopped smiling, looking at him. I do not accept this. Bai Yanjun laughed. You devil, think about all the things you have done in the past. How can you not bear these words? Is that so? Li Yunxin stepped forward, tapped his palm with the folding fan, walked slowly and said slowly, My friend, then think about it. According to the principle of justice, should the 6 ghosts in the river who killed mortals to pass the tribulation die? The prefectural magistrate Li Yaoxi has always been corrupt and perverted the law. He likes to beat people to confess and he wants to kill me for the property. Should he die? Qiao Jiaming, who usually walks the streets and prescribes some unknown prescriptions, is complacent after curing people to death. Should he die? The big and the little Qiao, who murdered people for the family property and had an affair with Qiao Jiaming which disrupted the ethics. Should he die? Long Taoyi, the official of the prefectural magistrate, colluded with the little Qiao, disrupted the justice and disregarded human life. Should he die? The 9th dragon's son ate people indiscriminately. I was also a human at that time, so I was different from him. Should I die? Lu Ling also doesn't care about the lives of mortals. He knows that I may die if he takes me back to the mountain, but he doesn't care very much. Should I die? The White Hell Lord was slightly taken aback by the series of questions he had thrown at him. Then he snorted, What about the child beggar? The child beggar that you gave him longevity? Li Yunxin smiled. the child beggar can't see and his body is weak. He can't live for another year or two. He walks on the street without food and clothing and is laughed at by people. Is there any joy in being a human? I want him to be a ghost and give him longevity. I want him to become a ghost cultivator. What's the problem? Bai Yanjun mocked him again. Do you want to say that you do these things selflessly and are a very good person? Good person? I'm not a good person. Li Yunxin shook his head and smiled. As for selfishness, of course I have selfishness. Why would I make these troubles if not for selfishness? I just want to tell you, my friend, that I am evil order, not evil chaos. Maybe you don't understand what it means. Let's put it this way, at least in this life I have the moral values of a normal person. Well, I can't say that I do. I can only say that I can understand the moral values of a normal person, and I admire this moral value. It's because of this moral value that I can eat delicious food and see beautiful scenery. That Lord Dongting eats people in moderation is also because of this. Because I understand and admire it, I will try to respect it when possible. For example, if I want to die today, I don't mind spending some effort to find someone who deserves to die. But if I can't find the evil person and only one good person dies, I won't stop doing it. You know I'm not a good person. But I will try to give him some compensation. It's not because of my moral sense. In fact, for some reason I don't really understand it. It's just because. This way, the world will be better. If the world is better, I will live better. Someone doesn't play by the rules, which means that he doesn't want the world to be better. Then he won't let me live better. If he doesn't let me live better, he will die. Li Yunxin pondered for a while, then looked up at Bai Yanjun in the night. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I have my own principles when I do things. Although I can't understand the so-called normal morality, I have a self-consistent theoretical system, which is attached to this set of morality. You can say that I'm not a good person, but I have my own way of doing things. Now that you want me to be a judge of the young world, I can accept it. But don't expect me to act like a demon. Even if I'm a demon, I, Li Yunxin, am also a human demon. Bai Yanjun spoke after a while. But the sarcasm on his face was gone. I've underestimated you, he said hesitantly, which was rare. Interesting. Although I don't agree with all your principles, it's still acceptable. After a while he frowned again. I'm plotting against you? That's the biggest joke in the world. He suddenly took out an iron chain and a thin blue booklet from his bosom and tossed them to Li Yunxin. Take them. After saying this, he grabbed the Taoist priest's soul and disappeared in a flash. But Li Yunxin was already used to this Yama King's unpredictable style, so he didn't think much of it. He took the iron chain and the thin booklet and examined them for a while. He realized that the iron chain was used to capture souls, and the thin booklet seemed to remember the person he needed to capture as well as some small rules. Li Yunxin held the folding fan, the iron chain and the thin booklet, and sat back down on the big green rock. The sound of insects gradually rang out again. He sat in silence for a while, then opened the folding fan. The surface of the fan was empty and white. He placed the iron chain and the thin booklet on the surface of the fan, then disappeared. Then he closed the fan again. Chapter 132. This fan was his temporary imperial residence. Before Li Yunxin took over the position of Dragon Son, he was prepared to have a strange temporary imperial residence. But when he woke up the next day, he found this bamboo fan beside him. However, this item was to his liking. It looked elegant and unobtrusive. But now was not the time to care about the temporary imperial residence. Bai Yanjun gave him some of Tsong Yunzi's memories. He realized that things might be more complicated than he thought. Some of the previous plans needed to be adjusted. Tsong Yunzi and Taoist Li had known each other for more than 2 years. They often had a feast together. Lord Dongting was a great fiendish demon with an eccentric personality. He also liked to eat people, but he ate in moderation and regularly. Every month he ate one person to satisfy his appetite. He also invited famous people nearby to eat together. He told a story first. When he was satisfied, he went to the middle hall. He was so powerful that Tsong Yunzi's mind was bewitched for 2 years. The cultivator didn't know that he ate human flesh. If it was a cultivator with a bit of intelligence, he would have noticed something unusual about Taoist Li. Li Yunxin tried to use a few seconds to think about the reason why Lord Dongting did this. But he soon realized it was useless. After all, the mind of a demon was different from that of a human. He might have a purpose or it was just for fun. That day, Song Yunzi found Lu Ling's body outside the city of Wei. He tried everything he could to save her, but he couldn't do anything. Lu Ling's ocean of qi and mountain of snow had collapsed. He seemed to have died. Her soul was not found. It should have been taken away by Yama. So he brought her body back to the residence of the Shangqing Danding sect in the city of Wei and waited anxiously. Although a void realm cultivator like him indeed had no way or qualification to stop Fairy Ling Kong from doing anything, if someone from the Langya paradise were to come and vent their anger on him out of grief, he would not be able to bear the consequences. After a day of suffering, he thought of Taoist Li. So he told a few children not to blaspheme the fairy's body. Then he hurried to Mount June. When he arrived at Mount June, he met with Taoist Li and told him what to do. At this point, Li Yunxin felt that this matter was a little strange. That Lord Dongting seemed to be very affectionate towards Dragon Sun. That night, when Long Sun faced off against Lu Ling, the first strike was already earth-shattering. It was understandable that the mortals of Egret continent were far away and couldn't see it. But how could a 3,000-year-old demon not know that there was a terrifying fluctuation of spiritual qi in the city of Wei? Why didn't you go and help? After that, the Lord Dongting listened to Yunzi's words and asked for some details. Song Yunzi didn't know about it, so he could only evade it. Although he came to ask Taoist Li for advice, he also knew that this matter was related to Dao Dong's secret. Although his mind was bewitched, he still had his spiritual sense. How could he reveal everything? But it was that little bit of vigilance that had harmed him that night. However, after Yunzi and Taoist Li talked about those things, he slowly calmed down and realized that this Taoist Li didn't seem to be able to help. So he returned to the city of Wei. And at that time, the Lord Dongting probably wanted to cast a long line, catch a big fish and slowly get the details. But the appearance of Li Yunxin ruined his plan. Another 2 or 3 days passed and today came. Song Yunzi found that Lu Ling's body was missing. As a cultivator, his first thought was that someone had taken it and was planning to make it into a puppet. Cultivators tempered their spirits and bodies. Even after death, the body would still maintain an extremely high level of strength. For a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent state like Lu Ling, even if the body was left out in the open, it would not rot for a year. A body like this was the best material to be made into a puppet. Song Yunzi felt anxious when he thought of this possibility. He could imagine how the cultivator from the grotto heaven would not have thought of this. Once he knew that this was the case, his life would really be in danger. Because in his residence the remains were gone. Li Yunxin now knew these things. He also knew that the Lord Dongting had unusual feelings for the Dragon Sun. He also knew that the feather coat was very important to Bai Yunxin. Then that big demon should not be far away. Someone from the grotto heaven was coming. The one who came must not be stupid, and his cultivation must be at least above Lu Ling's. The true state or the mysterious state. Cultivators above the true state were called Taoist Jinren. It was said that they had been reincarnated and proved the way of immortality. In the past, Li Yunxin thought this was probably true. But now he thought that maybe it was just that the Jinren above the true state were too difficult to kill. Even if Black Bai Yanjun wanted to kill them, it would take a lot of effort. According to his limited understanding of Bai Yanjun, that guy seemed to be afraid of trouble and would not bother to deal with those Jinren. All these factors were tangled together, making him sigh deeply while standing at the edge of the 1,000-mile Dongting. He planned to take over the body of Dragon Sun, then absorb believers and incense, and become an awe-inspiring Wei River Dragon King. Then he would use this demon's body to practice the arts of the painting school. No one ever said that demons couldn't practice the divine heart dharma. It was just that the unique origin of demons made it difficult for them to practice. Demons were roughly divided into 3 kinds. Demons like Bai Yunxin, the golden-winged rock king, the 9th young master, and the dragon god were congenital great demons. They were already extremely powerful as soon as they appeared in this world. They originally had demon power in their bodies. With people worshipping them, they would become stronger and stronger. But even if no one knew about them, they would not become weak. As time went by, their demon power would increase at a slow speed, just like the growth of human beings. Although the dragon god, the rock, and the dragon sun were called divine beasts. But in the eyes of cultivators, except for human beings, cultivators, and celestial beings, the existence with spiritual intelligence were all demons and een spirits. As for demons like Lord Dongting, he was a postnatal demon. They originally had bodies, birds, beasts or fish. Because they were blessed and gained spiritual intelligence, they gradually cultivated into monsters and demons. These acquired demons were far weaker than the congenital demons. They were often beaten to death after transforming into human forms. Because they used their spiritual power to transform, so they only knew some natural transformations. After transforming into human forms, they were almost no different from human beings. Because of various taboos, they often had to return to their original forms, and their cultivation was greatly reduced. All this was because these demons practiced the arts of spells they got from the unorthodox ways in the mortal world. Since it was a human's art of spells, it was easier to cultivate human meridians, so they had to transform into human forms. When they practiced in human form for a few days and had supernatural powers, they could show off and get some incense. Most of the mountain gods, earth gods, and river gods in the mortal world were post-celestial demons. As for ghost cultivators, they were pretty much the same. They needed yang energy, the power of incense, and the power of faith. But the situation was a little special. And the third type of demons was the most special. They didn't originally exist. They were neither congenital nor acquired. They were created out of thin air. For example, for some reason, some people in a certain place believed in the existence of a mountain god. When this belief was firm to a certain extent, strong to a certain extent, wide to a certain extent, or long enough, then the mountain god was really created according to the strong power of faith of the believers. This type of demon completely relied on the power of faith to survive. They were also the best at absorbing and transforming the power of faith. The stronger the power of faith, the stronger the demon. Even more powerful than the congenital and acquired demons who received the same amount of power of faith. And the weaker the power of faith, the weaker the demon. Once, even the last person didn't believe in him, he would disappear from this world. Li Yunxin's method of using the 300,000 yang energy in the city of Wei to reconstruct his spirit was probably inspired by an expert. So he needed an empty. Without the empty space, he wouldn't exist for long. And among these three types of demons, the congenital and acquired demons could all cultivate the heavenly heart technique. But first he had to empty his own demonic power. He only had the state but no demonic power. The principle was as simple as emptying a bucket of water before filling it with wine. However, even though the logic was simple, how many post-celestial fiendish demons would happen to be able to cultivate the heavenly heart execution after transforming into human form? And how many congenital demons dared to disperse their demonic power and cultivate from the beginning? In the world of demons, they devoured and killed more than humans. But now, Li Yunxin's condition was the best time to cultivate the heavenly heart technique. He reconstructed the Qiyuan Dharma body, but without demonic power, it was an empty bucket. Therefore, it was very likely that he would become the world's first congenital demon to cultivate the heavenly heart technique. This was supposed to be a wonderful thing. Over the past few days, Ting Qingshan had cultivated his water cloud force to the emptiness realm without any effort. One must know that when he was reconstructing this body, the meridians in his body were all designed and constructed bit by him. Now that the meridians in his body were connected, he was already a peerless genius. But there was Lord Dongting. And the matter in Weiqing City had not been settled. If he wanted to show his divinity, cultivate the heavenly heart technique and absorb the power of wish, he needed a comfortable environment. But now there were so many things that didn't go his way. Over the past few days he had been walking back and forth between the city of Wei and the Egret state, just to sort out these clues. He wasn't afraid of facing dangers, but he was afraid of facing dangers that he didn't understand. And now he felt that he already knew enough. Then it was time to move. For example, first collect some power of wish to make himself stronger quickly. At least he wouldn't be killed by Lord Dongting, by Yunxin, or anyone from Daotong. Li Yunxin stood by the lake and let out a breath and stretched. Because he had thought through some of the key points and had some plans, he felt slightly better. He couldn't help but smile as he muttered to himself. Then I'll start a cult first. Chapter 133. A 4 or 5-year-old boy was playing under a weeping willow. He was pink and cute. The sun was high up in the sky and it was cool under the tree. The boy was only wearing a red tutu and had his hair tied into 2 buns. He was using the willow twig to whip around on the ground while looking at the tree. A young woman was sitting on a green stone under the tree doing needlework. She would occasionally look at the boy with a happy smile on her face. But she gradually noticed that the boy's behavior was a little strange, so she followed his gaze and looked at the tree. But there was nothing. Only the morning sun shone through the gaps between the leaves. She quickly turned her head and asked the boy, "Tuan Tuan, what are you looking at?" The boy ignored her and continued to stare at the tree. After a while he giggled. After laughing for a while he pointed at the tree and replied to his mother, "This big brother." The young woman looked at the tree again, but she still couldn't see anything. She suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She felt that it was getting colder under the tree. She quickly got up and carried the boy away. As she walked, she looked at the tree a few more times. Of course, she couldn't see that Li Yunxin was sitting on a horizontal branch of the weeping willow. He was basking in the sun while lazily flipping through the thin book in his hand. This was the advantage of a Dharma body. The soul was condensed into a physical body and one could touch and feel like a real person. With a thought, one could hide from a mortal's eyes like a ghost. Unless that person was born with yin and yang eyes like this boy. The problem was that no matter how he looked, he couldn't see anything unusual about this boy. His father was a carpenter in the town. This kind of craftsman would have a good reputation in the area. But because he was too dull, he only married a wife at the age of 30, married this little girl. 4 years ago he had an only son. Who was this boy? Now the boy's name was on the thin book. Who was at the top? This meant that this boy was a very important person in Egret and needed a great demon like him to take it. But since he couldn't think of a reason, he took it. But he could use it. The saying that children tend to see unclean things has a widespread basis in this day and age. The woman took the child home and told her husband what had happened. Both of them loved their son dearly, so they didn't think it was a small matter. Because someone had died in the town before, everyone was already panicking. Now that her own son said that he saw an older brother on the tree, just thinking about it sent chills down her spine. Therefore they decided that this month, the men should work a little harder, carry an extra bucket and go to the temple to pay their respects. They were supposed to go to the Sanhika Dragon King temple to pray, but now the incense there was not that good. The temple attendant Taoist Kun Yangzi was already dead. He had always boasted that his Taoist magic was unparalleled. How could anyone believe that there was a real god in the temple? After much discussion they finally remembered that there was a small temple on Nanshan Hill. It should be dedicated to a mountain god. However, it would take a day to go to Nanshan Hill and back. It was too far, so he planned to go there next month when he was free. But at night, something happened again. The carpenter went to bed early that night. He was just waiting for his wife to coax the child to sleep so that he could crawl into bed. The woman knew her husband's intention and felt her body heat up. She patiently watched as the child gradually closed his eyes. She gently tucked him in, took off her clothes and crawled under the carpenter. But just as she lifted a corner of the quilt, suddenly they heard the child's bell-like laughter. The crisp, light laughter echoed in the dark room. At this moment the sky was dark and the courtyard outside the house was quiet. The carpenter and the woman were instantly rooted to the spot. After a breath of time they stared at the child with widened eyes. They saw him lying on the small wooden bed, waving his hands and grabbing at the air. He looked very happy. After laughing for a while he stretched out his hands. It was as if something or someone was making him laugh and wanted to carry him away. The carpenter and the woman immediately had goosebumps. They then saw the oil lamp on the table suddenly flicker, as if a gust of chilly wind was blowing past. Fear finally erupted. The carpenter snatched up his clothes and ran out of the house, while the woman scrambled to get hold of the child and rushed after him. The two stood in the courtyard, shivering. They put on their clothes and didn't dare to go back to the house. Outside the courtyard, the sky was full of stars and the moon was bright. Teeth chattering, they discussed for a quarter of an hour. That very night they went to the house next door to borrow 4 pancakes, a dozen eggs, a bamboo basket and 2 torches. They immediately set off for the mountain god temple on Nanshan Hill. Li Yunxin sat on the roof of his house, watching the light slowly leaving Egret Island, slowly passing through the bamboo forest, and slowly disappearing into the forest. He sighed with a smile, alas, mother's love. The couple hurried all night and finally arrived at the foot of Nanshan Hill. This Nanshan Hill was also near Dongting Lake. However, the lake shore was relatively steep, and it didn't have the white beach near Egret Island. Although the scenery was good, it was not famous. They were scared and tired all night, hungry and cold. At this time they saw a broken post pavilion on the side of the mountain. Although it was overgrown with weeds, it was still clean. Squinting and looking carefully, they could see a corner of the eaves of the mountain god temple halfway up the mountain. So the couple was a little relieved. They had arrived at the foot of the mountain and the sky was clear. There shouldn't be any ghosts. Thinking that they still had to climb the mountain, the child was tired and crying in the basket, so the couple decided to go to the post pavilion to rest and eat something. The sun rose and the couple felt warm. The woman coaxed the child for a while and the child stopped crying. The carpenter went to the lake and got some water to drink. He also got some for his wife. After eating and drinking, she was no longer hungry, so she leaned on the carpenter's shoulder and wanted to sleep for a while. However, as soon as she rested, the tiredness came like a tide. The woman hugged the child's arm tightly, and then slowly fell asleep with her husband. After a few seconds, there was a low snore and the child jumped out of the woman's arms. He staggered and almost fell. After muttering a few words in a low voice, he began to jog towards the west. There was an unknown small river in the west which was going to flow into Dongting Lake. The river was very shallow and colorful pebbles and green water plants could be seen in the river. Someone placed a few big stones at the shallowest part of the river for pedestrians to step on. The two ends were occasionally stepped on by people. So the child walked to the side of the road and stopped. Then he climbed on a blue stone with his hands and feet and sat down. It seemed that he felt it was not appropriate, so he adjusted his posture several times and finally felt satisfied. The sun gradually rose and the shadow of the bamboo beside the blue stone moved slowly and became shorter. The 4-year-old boy began to wait patiently. Chapter 134. Lu Laodao usually went down the mountain to carry water at noon. There used to be a spring behind the mountain god temple, but it gradually dried up a few years ago. Xianxia would carry 2 buckets of water from the foot of the mountain to the top every few days. But Lu Laodao had been here for a few days, so he needed more water. So now he went down the mountain to carry water every day. He had almost changed his appearance. He used to have a loose bun and a long beard. But since he came to Xianxia's place for almost 10 days, he cut off his beard. Of course, it was not shaved but cut into a short beard. In addition, he had been doing almost nothing these past few days and only focused on cultivating the water cloud force that Xianxia had taught him. As a result, he looked slightly younger. So the current Lu Laodao, probably people who were not familiar with him would not recognize him. 3 days ago, Xianxia came back from the city of Wei and told him that Magistrate Zhao and the 3 prefectural magistrates had left the city of Wei, and now it was managed by an official from a neighboring prefecture. That official did not want to cause too much trouble in the city of Wei. So many cases were casually dismissed. No one even investigated the cause of Constable Xing's death. This news made the depressed Lu Laodao feel a little better. But he still did not like to talk. He carried 2 heavy wooden buckets down the mountain road, but he did not feel tired. He just thought of what happened in the city of Wei for more than a month and felt it was like a dream. Cultivators, demons, came and went in that 1 month. Now he looked at the mountain scenery, the branches, the path, the sunlight, the cobwebs among the grass, the clothes that had just been washed and still smelled of acacia. It felt even more like a 1,000-year dream. He felt that he was a mortal after all, accidentally involved in the battle of so many immortals. But that wasn't a world that belonged to him. Even someone as talented as Brother Xian had been killed. That world was probably far away from him. When he woke up from the dream, it would be another few years or 10 years of ordinary life. He drank some coarse tea, knocked off the dried soil on the soles of his shoes, looked up at the sky. This life passed. Lu Laodao could not help but sigh. Although he knew that this was the life that an ordinary person like him should live, he always felt very empty in his heart. After all, he had seen that world. Before he knew it, he had reached the stone monument at the foot of the mountain. Out of habit, he looked at the intersection. He discovered that a couple seemed to be sleeping in a distant post house, and there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. So he went west. There was a small river in the west. The water was clear and shallow. There was a hint of sweetness in it. Boiled tea was the most fragrant. After taking a few steps, he suddenly heard a faint singing sound. It seemed to be the singing of a child. Lu Laodao cultivated the water cloud force, so his eyes and ears were already clearer than ordinary people. The child who was singing seemed to be not far from him, so he could hear it even more clearly. The child repeated the 4 lines of the song. The old soul on the 3-life stone. Let's not talk about admiring the moon and singing the wind. I am ashamed to meet an old friend from afar. Although this body is of the opposite sex, it will exist forever. These 4 sentences were like a giant hammer that pounded on his heart. Lu Laodao stood there blankly for a while. The wooden bucket in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Then he strode past a clump of trees in front of him and finally saw the scene in front of him. Beside the small river, a child was sitting on a large green rock in the shade of the bamboo. He was waving a green bamboo branch in his hand and singing. Lu Laodao stared at him and slowly walked in front of him. When the child saw him coming, he stopped singing and threw down the bamboo branch in his hand. Standing up on the green rock, he smiled and bowed to Lu Laodao, saying, "Old friend, why are you so late?" Lu Laodao was momentarily speechless. He could only say with a trembling voice, You are," the child continued. "In my previous life I was indebted to an old friend's care and I am deeply grateful. Because I was worried about your safety, I specially asked the King of Hell for mercy, and threw myself into the body of this dying child to see you. In my previous life I did too many bad things. After death I will have to suffer in the netherworld. Therefore I wanted to ask an old friend for a favor." When Lu Laodao heard this, tears flowed down his old face. He wanted to go forward and touch and hug the child, but he still felt that it was inappropriate. He could only nod his head repeatedly. "Brother X, speak." The child continued, "The Wei River Dragon King that I killed was the 9th son of the divine dragon, Qi, which was a violation of the laws of heaven. Therefore, as long as the resentment of the Dragon King does not dissipate, I will have to suffer. If an old friend can make people worship the Dragon King in this world of the living, he will receive incense in the netherworld and will no longer blame me. I have calculated that an old friend will have a chance in the future. If that chance can gather some people and believers, I will be able to be free sooner. If one day an old friend wants to establish a cult and accept disciples, since it is worshipping the divine dragon, let's call it the dragon cult." Lu Laodao choked with sobs and said repeatedly, Good. When the child finished speaking, he stood on the green stone and bowed to Lu Laodao and suddenly fainted. But before Lu Laodao could help him up, he woke up on his own. When he saw that it was a stranger in front of him and that the stone was cold, he immediately cried and turned over, almost falling from the stone. Fortunately, Lu Laodao caught him. When he carried the child kicked, hit and cried non-stop. The old man thought of the child just now, and then thought of his son and daughter who died young and couldn't help but feel sad. When he woke up and thought for a while, he guessed that the child should be the couple's child, so he carried him over. When the couple was woken up, they panicked when they saw Lu Laodao and the child. But Lu Laodao looked good and he was wearing a Taoist robe, so the couple asked him if he was a temple attendant of the mountain god temple, and told him about the recent events. Lu Laodao had experienced it when he was poor. After listening to the reason, he remembered that Brother Xen said that he was reincarnated into the body of this dying child. He thought that the child's life was about to end, and there was no need to spend money to worship the god. It was better to leave some money or arrange a funeral or give birth in the future. But the carpenter had a child at an old age and the woman loved her son, so how could she listen to such words? She scolded the Taoist priest for speaking unlucky words, and cursing her fat and lively child to die. She was so angry that she didn't even worship at the temple and turned around to leave. Lu Laodao stood beside the post house and watched as they carried the child away, and tears flowed down his face. Li Yunxin stood beside him, looked at him for a while, sighed and also left. It wasn't that he didn't want to see Laodao, but it was for his own good. What he needed to do now was risky. This was the only way to minimize the risk. It wasn't that he didn't want him to spend the rest of his life with Shirkuizi on Nanshan Hill. But these days he often came to investigate and realized that it didn't seem to be the life Laodao wanted. Since that was the case, he would fulfill his wish. What's the fun in living? By the time the husband and wife returned to Egret Island, it was already time for lunch. The neighbors on the street saw them and they were all curious about what was going on. The carpenter's family of 3 borrowed things in the middle of the night and rushed to the mountain god temple. This news had already spread during the day, and now it had become another strange story in town. The couple was angry and afraid. But since everyone already knew, they weren't afraid to say it. They told the story of meeting a Taoist priest at the foot of Nanshan Hill, and embellished the story to ease their anger, and also to share some of their fear. The carpenter was one of the more popular people in the town. Seeing that the carpenter's family was in trouble, and they were so relaxed, more and more people started to gather. Li Yunxin stood beside the carpenter's family of 3 and listened to them. He knew the time had come. So he suddenly pounced and possessed the child's body. Chapter 135. The 3 of them were sitting outside a tea house on the long street of the town talking. The owner of the tea house had ordered tables and chairs from the carpenter, so they had a good relationship. So he served tea to the 2 and told them to have a good rest. He picked up the child and teased him, saying that if he didn't dare to go home tonight he could stay at his house and go to the temple of the Dragon King tomorrow. Or he heard that there was a Taoist priest on Mount June. Maybe he could ask for a favor. The onlookers saw that the story was almost finished, so they lost interest and planned to leave. Because the sun had almost set behind the mountains, the street was covered in shadows. The afterglow of the setting sun gilded the people dark red, and there was a slight breeze. At this time the child suddenly stuttered in the arms of the tea house owner. "My time has come." Although it was a child's voice, the tone was calm and steady as if it came from the mouth of an adult. At that time the owner was turning to greet the people who were about to leave. Hearing the voice he turned to look. He found that his little nephew was calm and indifferent, and that expression, he suddenly remembered what the carpenter couple had just said. Fear gushed out from the bottom of his heart like a tide. His arm trembled and the child slipped from his arms. The carpenter couple didn't hear what the child had just said. Seeing her son fall on the ground, the woman hurried to help him. However, she saw the child take 2 steps back, avoiding her hand. Such a pink child wearing a doo-doo, after stepping back 2 steps, unexpectedly stood still with a solemn face. He bowed to the carpenter couple and said calmly, "My time has come." The onlookers finally saw everything clearly. It was as if a cold current swept through the crowd. The noisy crowd quietened down in an instant. A chill slowly crept up their spines. They all stared at the child with round eyes. They saw him say to the carpenter and the woman who were also stunned, "I was the dragon prince of the vast sea and my real body was Qi Wen. I sneaked out of the dragon palace for fun and reincarnated into your family. I was supposed to die when you gave birth, but my father loved that the vast sea was boring, so he allowed me to play in the human world for 4 years. The Qi Wen that appeared in Wei City a few days ago was my real body. Today the time had come. Yesterday it was my elder brother who came to pick me up. But seeing that you all love me, he delayed it for another day so that I could say goodbye to you all." At this point the chill on the people's spines slowly receded. Although he was still so shocked that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly, he knew that it was Dragon Prince and not Evil Ghost after all, so he wasn't as afraid in his heart. But someone was already trembling with excitement. Coming into contact with a god at such a close distance. The carpenter couple was also dumbfounded. The woman wanted to cry but didn't dare to. She wanted to hug him but didn't dare to hug him. She could only cover her mouth as tears flowed through the gaps between her fingers. The child continued, "But in order to repay your kindness in raising me for 4 years, I have buried a golden statue under the loquat tree in your family's courtyard. In the future when you worship this statue I will receive incense. I have the body of a divine dragon and my magic power is boundless. You can also worship me as the cult leader and establish a dragon cult. When you worship me you can chant, 'The cult leader of the dragon cult will enjoy immortal blessings forever, and live as long as the heavens to show your sincerity. In a few days there may be black dragon envoys, white dragon envoys, blue dragon envoys and red dragon envoys appearing in this world. You must not neglect them.'" After saying this he shouted, all right, I'm going." Then he fell to the ground and didn't move anymore. When the woman saw this she immediately cried and rushed forward. When she checked his breath she found that the child was really dead. At this time her husband dared to walk forward and hug the child. It seemed that he couldn't cry even if he wanted to. He had something else on his mind and kept looking in the direction of his family. And the people were in an uproar like a swarm of flies buzzing in discussion. Those who believed in it pretended to worship the child's corpse. Some were skeptical and shouted to go to the carpenter's courtyard to dig it up. Some hurried to protect the child and walk away, saying that it was a newly dead child with a strong murderous aura. At this time, Li Yunxin used the iron chain to lock the child's small soul, but he couldn't see what was wrong with the soul. Many demons and Yin spirits can temporarily pull a person's soul out of their body. But unless it's a powerful demon, it's very difficult to really take a person's soul away. When it's 10 feet away from the person, the soul will only linger around the body. Because of this, when demons harm people, they can only make the soul leave the body. If they find a Taoist priest with some cultivation, it's very easy to pull the soul back. And the iron chain in Li Yunxin's hand was given to him by Yanjun. Once you put it on a person's body, you can pull the soul out. As long as the iron chain is here, the soul will obediently follow it. Right now he used the iron chain to lock the child's soul and left the crowd. He followed the instructions in the booklet. First, see if there are any locust trees nearby. None. Then he walked a little further and found a place where the Yin energy converged, and led the child's soul to that place. Then he shouted, "It's time, why don't you go?" The soul shuddered and disappeared into the Yin chi. In fact, Li Yunxin really wanted to go in and take a look, to see what the underworld looked like. But he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to return, so he had to give up. When he returned to the street, the crowd was no longer there. They all went to the carpenter's house. At this time the sky was already dark. People lit torches or lamps and gathered under the tree to watch the carpenter dig out the golden statue. Originally, the carpenter's death was a sad thing for everyone. But now that they knew it was Qi Wen and the Dragon Prince, they felt that it was a miraculous happy event. The carpenter himself didn't seem to be sad anymore. Instead, he was happy that there might be a golden statue. Happy. Even if it was a small statue the size of a fist, even if it was hollow, it was worth a lifetime of hard work for him. In the noisy and strange happy atmosphere, only the woman was holding her child's cold body, sitting in the darkness under the eaves of her house and wiping her tears. He cried like this for a while. Suddenly she found that people suddenly quieted down. After 2 breaths, exclamations broke out simultaneously. Then almost everyone in the courtyard knelt down. Her husband, whose hair had already turned white, stood under the loquat tree in the courtyard, in the dim light of the torches. Hugging a golden statue, he smiled joyfully. But the shadow on his face made the smile look a little ferocious. The woman stared at her husband for a while, then suddenly lowered her head and cried even more sadly. People were shouting words like, "Dragon King," "Dragon Cult Leader," "Qi Dragon Son," and so on. But these voices were vague in the woman's ears, and the golden statue and the firelight were also vague in her eyes. There was only that little corpse in her world, only that one thing was clear and real. Chapter 136. It has been more than 10 days and the wilderness mountain is green again. After a rain, the ashes of the grass and trees become the best fertilizer. So the shoots come out of the wet soil, see the sunshine and grow wildly when the wind blows. When the middle-aged man in a gray robe stands on the land where Lu Ling fell, the grass has reached his feet. The middle-aged man is just a middle-aged man with a plain face. But his beard is black, smooth and shiny as if he has been carefully groomed. The gray robe is also a plain gray robe, but there is no wrinkle except for the smooth wrinkles caused by the drooping clothes. There is no trace of stitching or stitching. He stands here and looks at the city of Wei to the southwest. It is a sunny day today, and the city of Wei can be seen clearly under the blue sky. Looking into the distance, he sees a large piece of lush wilderness forest and the Wei River reflecting the sunlight like a jade belt, and he can't see the end of the Dongting here. The middle-aged man looks at it for a while and sighs in a low voice, "This old thing." Then he strolled forward and a gray cloud appeared under his feet. After 3 steps he is already on the gray cloud. Then his robe flutters and he rides the cloud with the wind, straight to the city of Wei. Yunzi, the president of the Institute of Law of the Langya Cave of Daotong and Enlightened Immortal, arrives at the city of Wei on this day. Cultivator Yunzi is already 132 years old. The realm of Enlightened Immortal is not the highest among the realms. Above it are Advanced Immortal and Perfect Harmony Immortal. But the reason why he comes to the city of Wei instead of others is that he has been living in the mortal world for 46 years before he entered the Tao. He started to cultivate at the age of 46. Before that he was a middle-level official. Although the heavenly heart Tao art had washed away his worldly aura, He was still the most knowledgeable person in the Langya Grotto Heaven compared to the others who had started cultivating at a young age or were born in the Grotto Heaven. The Langya Grotto Heaven, which was ranked 9th among the 18 Grotto Heavens of Daotong, had no lack of treasures. Many cultivators relied on famous scrolls, rare scrolls, or even treasured scrolls to pass the heavenly tribulation. The time they saved could be used to cultivate their Dao techniques. But this time Ling Kongzi, who was the most talented and favored one in the cave, died in the city of Wei. Therefore he had to come forward and take care of it in the mortal world. After all, this Yunzi was the most perceptive. At least that was what the cultivators of Langya Grotto Heaven thought. Yunzi, who stepped into the city of Wei, hid his tracks. No one noticed this immortal descending from the sky. He had already used his supernatural power to send a message in advance. Therefore, when he arrived at the place where the Xianxia pill cauldron was stationed, the servant had already prepared a place for him to rest. Yunzi didn't seem to care about those external matters. He only called one person over and immediately asked about serious matters. This person was the closest servant of Tsong Yunzi in the city of Wei. Her name was Qiu Er. His real name was Qiu Yiqi, and he was a member of a good family in the city. Because he wanted to learn Dao techniques, he used money to send to the Xianxia pill cauldron sex station. Who knew that before he could learn much, he was taken in as a catamite by Tsong Yunzi because of his good looks. This Qiu Er was sly and knew when to advance and when to retreat. In 3 to 4 years he had already become the closest person to Tsong Yunzi. When Tsong Yunzi grew older, he wasn't good at sexual matters. Thus he really treated him like his own nephew and taught him some profound Dao techniques. Now Qiu Er had already become a teenager of 18 or 19 years old. His Taoist name was Ming Qiu Er. When Tsong Yunzi wasn't around, he was already someone who had a say in this station. When Yunzi summoned him, Qiu Er told him everything that happened these few days, including how he found Tsong Yunzi's corpse in the forest beside the Wei River. Although he was sad when he spoke, he didn't lose his composure. His speech was also orderly. Therefore Yunzi didn't hate him. Therefore, when Qiu Er finished speaking, Yunzi didn't drive him away. He just stood aside obediently. The cultivator in the realm of truth pondered for a while and shook his head slightly. This must be done by that old thing. That old thing has been in Dongting for 2,000 years. There must be some unclear relationship between that old thing and that dragon son. I don't believe that they are incompatible like fire and water. As soon as Dragon's son died, Ling Er's Dharma body also disappeared. Tsong Yunzi was killed again. The head of a Taoist in the realm of emptiness was smashed. It must be done by a demon. Now the deity position in the temple near the city of Wei is empty. That old thing in Dongting doesn't occupy it. She must be waiting for something. He paused for a moment. Waiting for that Bai Yunxin. That old thing may think that Bai Yunxin killed Dragon's son. Well, Ling is arrogant, but she is not reckless. After such a catastrophe, there must be a powerful force beyond her calculation making trouble. It must be that Bai Yunxin, the daughter of the Rock King. Speaking of this, the cultivator paused for a long time and then asked, "Is there anything else these days?" Even though Qiu Er was smart, she didn't know how to answer such a general question from the immortal. But after thinking for a while, she still observed his face while picking up some recent news in the city of Wei. After saying a few things, she found that the immortal had no sadness or joy on his face. She became bolder and talked for 2 hours. When he really had nothing to say, Yunzi, who had been sitting and even breathing, finally opened his eyes. Worship the dragon god? He looked out of the window. And the golden statue? As I've seen it too. Qiu Er said. It's said that there was a baby in the Egret continent who called himself the Dragon Prince of the Vast Sea. He said that his real body was Qi Wen. He came to the mortal world to play for 4 years and it was time to return. So he told his parents about his real body, and the carpenter really dug out a golden statue in the yard. When I was looking for my master, I went there to take a look. I said that a Lao Dao had predicted that the child would die, so a group of people went to him and asked how to worship the golden statue. That Lao Dao was also a money grubber, so he collected some real money and worshipped the golden statue in the mountain god temple of the southern mountain, and named himself the temple attendant of the dragon god temple. But that thing... Qiu Er frowned. Immortal, I've learned some techniques. I can also distinguish the Reiki on the golden statue. There's Reiki, but it's not the Reiki of the dragon's son. Yunzi said indifferently. Chiyo's face showed just the right amount of surprise. How did Sendo know? Yunzi shook his head slightly and finally showed a slight smile. There is no vast sea. There is no dragon prince. I think that it must be a clever demon that possessed the child's body, and used his mouth to say such nonsense to fool the ignorant mortals. That demon doesn't know much and mortals have no way of knowing. Thus the golden statue definitely has the demon's reiki. Chiyo pretended to be enlightened. Sendo is wise. Then, the so-called dragon cult is just a bunch of useless people. Yunzi shook his head. No. There is only one thing. The dragon son does have a chi kiss. It is the Wei River Dragon King, the dragon son that was killed. The Wei River Dragon King's true body is a chi kiss. Even your master doesn't know about this, so how did the demon know? If you want to say that it was a coincidence, the dragon son has 9 sons, so how did he fall for the Wei River Dragon King? At this moment Chiyo really didn't understand. She could only stand there and listen quietly to what Sendo was saying. Yunzi thought about it for a while and smiled. This old thing. This monster that gathered the divine dragon cult not only knows about Chi's kiss, but also absorbs the power of faith from the Joss flames beside that old thing. A demon that can do this can't be an idiot. Since he isn't dumb, then why did he make up such an obvious lie? What vast ocean dragon prince, why? It means that someone instructed him to do so. He purposely said that, but he also mentioned the chi kiss. What was real and what was fake to make people curious? Curiosity leads to investigation and contact, to see what the dragon son's chi kiss is like. Yunzi heaved a sigh. This old thing has a plan. He instructed people to do such a farce. But, these are all common tricks in the mortal world, how can they hide from me? He set up such a trap to lure Bai Yunxin here. So what if Bai Yunxin is here? He still wants to lure people from Daotong into the trap. Chiyo was just listening at first. But now she really listened to it. For a moment she forgot to be respectful and actually interrupted. So someone instructed a demon to make up such an obvious lie to attract attention? But what about Sendo who lured people from Daotong into the trap? Yunzi wasn't angry. He just smiled again. Ling killed Dragon Son, so that old thing naturally wants to take revenge. But that old thing definitely doesn't want to do it himself. He only wants to see people fight until both sides are injured, then he can take advantage of it. I heard that Dragon Son died that night, and then Ling and Bai Yunxin fought. I don't know much about the inside story. But if I want to take revenge, I don't want to know everything. It's definitely not wrong to kill both of them. This is how demons do things. Ling disappeared from here. It must be that old thing's doing. With this, he lured me into this mess to help him fight with Bai Yunxin. This old thing is good at scheming. I'm not a fool. I'm not anxious, so I won't fall into his trap. Let's see how his dragon cult gets stronger and stronger. Let's see how it ends when he finally lured Bai Yunxin here. Chiyo seriously thought for a long time, and felt that there was a loophole in Sendo's deduction. So she asked, Sendo, how can that person be so sure that Sendo will definitely participate in it? Fairies' remains are important, but after all it's just. Yunzi glanced at him. Remains? Who said that Linger is dead? She carries the soul-calming bell that the master of calligrapher gave her. Even if Black Bai Yanjun came personally and wanted to steal her soul from the bell, he would have to ask the master of calligrapher for permission. Chiyo was stunned when she heard this. Sendo actually asked him questions for so long, and even told him such a secret. But she was only stunned for a short while, and then she understood Sendo's intention. She immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times, and said with a trembling voice, in the name of Sendo. Sendo told me so much, it must be intentional. But she heard Yunzi talking to himself and interrupted her. Look at the questions I asked just now, is it still useful? Although it's a little dirty, it's not bad to have a smart person to temporarily stay. After all, she has some foundation and she's not a person from Daotong. Chiyo was stunned and she raised her head to look at Yunzi. She found that Sendo was looking at the place where she just stood talking to the air. Before she could figure out what he meant, she saw Yunzi nod and say, Sorry for troubling you. Then she waved her hand gently. A breeze caused by the sleeve blew and Chiyo's soul left her body. Yunzi flicked his fingernails as if he was disgusted with the dirt, and his soul vanished. But in the next moment Chiyo's body quickly stood up again. Everything that had happened in that split second was as if he himself was just slightly stunned and swayed a little. The newly born Chiu stretched her body and walked a few steps in the room. Then she said naturally, "It's a pity that all the people of the Ling Su sword sect in the city of Wei are dead. After this I still have a good debt to settle with the Ling Su sword sect. I fought with the souls of Li Chunfeng and his wife and both of us were injured. I was killed by 2 Emptiness Realm swordsmen. 2 useless people. Li Chunfeng and his wife's only son escaped. Now that I think about it, it's really, don't be angry." Yu Yunzi shook his head. "It's already a great achievement for you to be able to find them and injure their divine soul true bodies. Think about it. You fought with Li Chunfeng's incarnation from 1,000 li away, and you were seriously injured. When you ran into those 2 swordsmen of the High Void Sword sect, you lied to them and told them that the 10,000 miles of mountains and rivers painting was there. You lured them into killing you, took away your talismans and sealed Li Chunfeng's only son's ocean of qi and mountain of snow for you. The whole plan was flawless. Your talisman was made by a Taoist of the culmination realm. No one in the secular world can undo the seal on his ocean of qi. So what if you let him escape temporarily? You will find him one day. There are traces of that child in Clear River and Wild Plain Forest. I know his name is Li Yunxin and he is very handsome. Wasn't he the young man in the temple who said that Ling Er and Dragon's son were fighting? Since he is dead, the jade slip of enlightenment is either in the hands of that old thing or by Yunxin. Or maybe it is in Ling Er's hands. Since you and I are here, what else can't be solved? With our intelligence, it is naturally easy to play with these demons in the palm of our hands. Is there anyone in the Wei River who is better at scheming than us?" Yunzi tried to persuade her for a long time, as if he was coaxing a willful child. The cold demeanor of an enlightened Taoist master was nowhere to be seen. After this persuasion, this Chiu snorted and walked to the table and sat down. But after sitting for a while, she suddenly slammed the table and screamed, "But we still can't spare the Ling Su sword sect." Yunzi sighed. "Heh. After dealing with this matter, we will go to the Ling Su sword sect, okay?" Chiu snorted again. But she only sat for a while and then stood up. "I still don't feel happy. I'm going to get some fresh air." "Don't follow me." Yunzi shook his head. "I won't follow you. But don't get within 3 feet of the Dongting River. As for the others, no one in the Wei River can hurt you." After saying this, Chiu slammed the door and went straight into the courtyard. Chapter 137. Think about it when you are hungry but not thirsty. First, there is a piece of steaming, crispy and fragrant beef wrapped in delicious sauce. He picks it up with chopsticks and puts it into his mouth slowly. Then a mouthful of steaming white rice with distinct grains, sweet, soft and elastic, goes into his mouth. The aroma of beef is steamed by the rice and mixed together, permeating every grain of rice. As soon as he bites, the delicious juice bursts out in his mouth because of the smooth and tender taste. Then he is filled with joy and happiness. Li Yunxin once thought he would never experience this kind of happiness again. Because this body does not feel hungry. It is difficult to taste the deeper taste of food when eating without hunger. So he also understands why the Lord Dongting pays so much attention to satisfying the desire of food. But now this feeling appeared again. People are worshipping the golden statue of Dragon Prince kissed by the vast sea. The cat demon attached to it shared this cup of soup with Li Yunxin. He was indeed a cheese kiss. Mortals don't know whether this Chiwen is Chiwen or not, but there is only one Chiwen god in the world. Who cares if he is Vast Sea Dragon Prince or Wei River Dragon King? Powerful people near Wei River all think that Chiwen is dead. Only Li Yunxin sits in a wooden pavilion at the head of Egret Island, leaning against a wooden pillar of primary color. While enjoying the satisfaction and happiness of the power of incense and wish flowing into his body like a trickle, he throws salted fish into the water. It is noon and the sun is burning. There are few people near the Dragon King temple. Cicadas are screaming in the trees and dragonflies are standing on the tips of the withered grass. It is just summer, but the air on the ground has been a little twisted by the sun. There is a bamboo basket beside Li Yunxin with a dozen salted fish in it. The fishy smell attracts a few flies buzzing around him, but they never dare to get close because of their instinctive fear. Beneath his feet was the shallow waters of Dongting. At this moment he was holding salted fish's tail in his hand. When he loosened his grip, he fell into the water with a splash. Hence, he muttered, a salted fish opens its mouth and falls into the water with a plop. He picked up another one and threw it into the water, chanting, two salted fishes, two mouths open, plop 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 into the water. After a while he looked at the surface of the water, but there was still no movement. So he picked up the silver wine jug on the railing and poured a thin line into his mouth. Squinting at the sparkling lake, he threw another salted fish into the water. 3 salted fish with 3 mouths open, plop 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 into the water. Just like that he slowly threw the dozen or so salted fish into the lake. He kicked over the bamboo basket and threw away the wine pot. Leaning against the pillar, he slowly sat on the floor of the pavilion and closed his eyes. Li Yunxin rested for a quarter of an hour amidst the chirping of the cicadas and the cool breeze. Then he opened his eyes. She saw a pair of red shoes embroidered with golden threads and a thin red dress on the floor in front of her. So he tilted his head, half closed his eyes, raised a hand and waved it casually as a greeting. "Oh, Miss Li, how have you been after marriage?" The lady in the red dress did not speak. She only clasped her hands behind her back and silently walked a few steps in front of him. Then she looked at the lake outside the pavilion and asked, "For no reason, why did you throw that thing at my house?" Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and raised his head to look at her. He smiled. "That night when I saw Miss, I fell in love with her at first sight. I couldn't forget her. Today I was so depressed that I came to get drunk. I also heard rumors about Miss, so I bought a basket of salted fish and threw it into the lake, just to see Miss's face again. I even wrote a poem for Miss, 1 salted fish, 1 mouth." The lady in red was already angry. "You actually dare to use this matter to make fun of me? You're just a ghost cultivator, master." But halfway through her words she suddenly stopped. Her thin brows furrowed and her bright eyes turned around. The expression on her face became indifferent again. She only said, "Oh, so that's how it is. That Zhou Xian. When he was alive he was an interesting scholar who studied hard. But after he became a ghost and wanted him to become a ghost cultivator, he only knew how to say, 'My karma is here, my karma is here.' He's a fool. The moment he saw me he cried and threw a tantrum, saying that he owed me a great debt of gratitude. How boring. He asked me how my marriage is. Not good at all." When Li Yunxin heard this his eyes lit up. He slapped the fan in his hand and stood up. "Yes, yes. A mortal's soul will be damaged if it leaves the body for a long time. Once it is damaged it will become stupid and only have a heart of obsession. After all, that Zhou Xian is just a mortal. As for me, The lady burst out laughing. "Since you are interested in me, are you willing to follow me to White Forest Red Flower City and be my husband?" Li Yunxin was stunned for a while, as if he couldn't believe that this matter was settled so easily. But after a while he hurriedly stood up and said, I'm willing. The lady's pair of bright eyes looked at him up and down for a while, and the smile on her face suddenly disappeared. She took a step back, flew upside down and sat on the railing. Her pair of slender legs swung back and forth in the air, revealing her faintly discernible snow-white ankles under her skirt. Do you think I'm stupid?" The lady slightly pouted and glanced at Li Yunxin. "When you saw me that night you only heard people call me Red Lady, but did they ever mention that my surname is Li? Just now you called me Miss Li. How could you not know that you've already given yourself away?" Hearing her words, Li Yunxin was instantly dumbfounded. She stood rooted to the ground, unable to say a word. Seeing him like this, the lady finally smiled complacently. You're really smart. You know that I'm the daughter of Lord Dongting, and you also know that Taoist Leon Mount Jun is my father. I've heard about your matter from my father." She slightly narrowed her eyes, a dangerous smile appeared on her face. "You're that dragon son's friend. Since you're that dragon son's friend, do you know how I was beaten back to my original form, how I turned into a red carp and how I suffered?" At this time, Li Yunxin put away the previously feigned look of admiration on his face and became serious. He slightly frowned and clenched his silver teeth. "I know." Red Lady slightly raised her face and glanced at him. "Even if you know, you should know how much I hate that dragon's son. Although it's because of my father. But you put on this play. Do you think I don't know your intention? You guessed that I and that Zhou Xian don't get along well, and you felt that I had some affection for you that night, so you planned to use your beauty to seduce me. What love at first sight, what unbearable suffering. Do you think I'm one of those mortal women? You're still far from deceiving me with this trick. Speak properly. Do you really intend to become my husband and bewitch my father to take revenge for your dragon son friend? Is that right? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and took a deep breath. So what? Red Lady coldly snorted again. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you because I know that you're that dragon son's friend? Li Yunxin was silent again. After a moment of silence he suddenly burst into laughter. Huh? So what if I die? He stopped smiling and looked at Red Lady with a slightly ferocious face. My friend was killed and your father, Lord Dongting, was also his friend. But I told him these things and he wanted to hurt me. It's okay if he wanted to hurt me. These days. But nothing happened. He is the Lord Dongting, a powerful monster for 3,000 years. Dragon's son died beside Dongting, but he was indifferent. Do you know that there is a dragon cult recently? Worshipping Dragon's son. Worshipping Cheese Kiss. Is there such a humiliation? Li Yunxin said angrily, I'm just a Yin spirit that is about to take shape. What can I do to that Daotong and the big monster? Do you know what's going on with the dragon cult? If you ask me, isn't it caused by that Daotong and the monster? He used the name of my friend Dragon's son to absorb the power of incense and wish, but he absorbed it from another monster. She even wanted to humiliate him again. Yes. He die. Back. How can I bear such a great humiliation? Li Yunxin swung his sleeves fiercely. I can't think of anything else. In order to avenge this, I give myself to you. So what? So what if you kill me? This is my last chance. After he finished speaking, he stared straight at Red Lady. Although he looks fierce, he seems to be afraid in his heart. He grasps and puts down the folding fan and raises his head slightly. Obviously, he is cheering himself up in his heart. Red Lady looks at him calmly for a while. Suddenly, she shakes her head slightly and smiles. She raises her hand to fix her hair, and then squints at the distant Dongting. Then she turns to look at Li Yunxin. Look at you. Am I that fierce? Give yourself to me. What kind of nonsense is that? Do you think my appearance and temperament have wronged you? She purses her lips and smiles, looking at Li Yunxin up and down. I like your temperament. You are an honest and loyal man, but you know how to be flexible. She is silent for a while and sighs slightly. I am also like you. I married Du Xing just to repay his kindness. I am a ghost, so I can only have a ghost marriage with him. I didn't expect that. He has completely changed. Such a turn of events seems to make Li Yunxin stunned again. He looks at Red Lady in a daze. The resolute and sad expression on his face is gone for a moment, and he looks extremely embarrassed. After being stunned for a while, he takes 2 steps back and stutters, Red Lady, you are? I am. Red Lady shakes her head and squints at the Dongting in the distance. Although Du Xing is not pleasing, he is my wife after all. That night and these days I have not paid attention to him. I don't think I will in the future. I just let him stay in Red Flower City and support him. But since he is here and I am not a shameless person, I won't promise you anything else. You should give up on such thoughts. As for the dragon cult, my father doesn't know it. Red Lady looks at Li Yunxin seriously. You don't know the relationship between my father and Dragon's son, so it's not your fault for this misunderstanding. But don't worry, my father will never ignore it. It's not convenient to tell you the key, but you have to wait patiently. My father also suspects that the dragon cult is created by Dao Tong and by Yunxin, but it is also because of this that he has to wait. Let's see how powerful the dragon cult is. If it really creates a big demon, how can Dao Tong sit still? She thinks for a while and sighs. It's also because my father got that. Alas. I think it's also a big trouble. That woman. Li Yunxin immediately says, I heard from the Lord Dongting that he got another concubine. But it's not a concubine. It's a trouble. Now the Taoists in the city of Wei are not willing to leave. After saying this, Red Lady stops talking. She just sits on the fence of the wooden pavilion, holding her chin with one hand and looking at Dongting. No one knows what she is thinking. Her red sleeves slide down, revealing half of her snow-white arm. Li Yunxin doesn't say anything and just stands there. The pavilion quiets down. The cicada, which was scared by them just now, starts to chirp again. An egret schemes over the water looking for some small fish to eat. A small boat is rowing slowly on the lake. There is only a white line of clouds in the sky. The distant mountains are green and tender. After staying quietly like this for a while, Red Lady lets out a sigh and smiles. This is really good. It's not like the Red Flower City. After saying this, she jumps down from the fence and throws a small bell to Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin catches it and finds that the bell seems to be made of gray iron. It's misty. When he shakes his hand, there is a strange bell sound. Not clear but a little sharp, like the chirping of a bird. Red Lady points at the bell. That night you gave me the soul of a Taoist and said it was a gift. I think you must have done something, so you refined the Taoist soul and made it into this bell. Actually, it's interesting that the Taoist soul hasn't dissipated yet and is still conscious. But when you pinch this bell, it's like pinching his ghost. When a ghost is pinched, isn't it very painful? That's why it cries like this when you touch it. Can be used to relieve boredom. She smiles softly as she says this. After that, he rested for a while and suddenly asked, "Then do you really love me?" Li Yunxin is startled when he hears this. Then he blinks his eyes. You still no shame. Red Lady smiles, jumps out of the pavilion and goes straight into the water. I will help you ease the pain of my father. You must remember my kindness. Li Yunxin looks at her disappearing into the distance. After a while he finally lets out a sigh of relief. This little demon dares to tease this king. He blinks his eyes and laughs, feeling a little amused. The Lord Dongting is like a human, but his daughter is even more like a human. If he doesn't have to, he really wants to tease her slowly. It's really very interesting. Such a clever little demon. While laughing, he gently pats his hands with the folding fan and slowly walks along the road. While walking, he thinks of something. Like this, he passes through Egret town, turns into a wild forest, and walks towards the direction of the city of Wei. Suddenly, he sees a man in colorful clothes running towards him while waving his hands and feet, shouting at him, "King, king! Disaster, disaster, disaster!" This man pats his arms while running like a child playing, but the expression on his face is frightened and anxious, although it is a slightly protruding, somewhat strange face. When he runs closer, Li Yunxin frowns and kicks him to the ground, scolding him to his face, "Disaster, your sister. Only the minions of the villain will shout like this, do you understand?" Chapter 138. In fact, Li Yunxin is quite tolerant to these monsters. He even has a sense of intimacy. When he saw the four monsters listening to Mrs. Sanhua, he felt it was novel and interesting, so he gave them names: Sheriff, Tsiji, Shuck, and Pheasant. The one who comes here today is Pheasant. At that time he just felt it was interesting. When he took over the bodies and went to see these monsters again, he actually felt intimate. This kind of intimacy has nothing to do with feelings. In Li Yunxin's view, it is just a physiological recognition because of similar identities. However, he knows that physiological feelings usually affect psychology, and a person like him can be so easily influenced by physiology, which means he has a sense of loneliness subconsciously. Because of loneliness, he needs the care and recognition of the same kind. Therefore, after seeing these monsters again, he feels, well, not bad. This is a dangerous tendency. He has a sign of losing control of his emotions, and he doesn't like this kind of sign at all. So he tries a kind of close but distant relationship. But it doesn't seem to be very successful. The pheasant is kicked to the ground by him. He stares with round eyes and still says, my king, it's not good." Li Yunxin sighs and picks him up. He takes a big step and walks a few miles in the jungle in the blink of an eye. Then he throws him to the ground. "I told you to patrol the mountain well and don't get close to the Dongting within a mile. Do you know how close you were to the Dongting just now? If you dare to mess up my business like this next time, I will stew you into a braised chicken tonight. Tell me what's wrong." Before the decisive battle between him and Dragon Sun and Bai Yunxin, he had ordered Mrs. Sanhua and other monsters to leave the city of Wei. Now he has created the dragon cult, and these monsters have been possessed in the portraits worshipped by the people. The dragon prince of the vast sea indeed has a golden statue, but in the eyes of the people, as the dragon prince, he has no one to order around, which makes him lose his prestige. What kind of person was Lu Laodao? At once he fabricated 4 protectors and one to serve the dragon lady. He also made a nondescript clay statue. The 4 little demons and Qiao Jessen's soul also had a place to rest. Li Yunxin also orders the 4 monsters to patrol the wilderness forest between Dongting and the city of Wei when they are free. Although the little demons did not know what the king's intentions were, They still tried their best every day to tell him everything they heard and heard, regardless of whether it was important or not. However, it was inevitable that they would stumble when they spoke. Li Yunqin always had to think carefully for a long time before he could understand what these guys wanted to say, such as now. The pheasant stood up and said in a panic, "The city. A fiend has come to the city." Outside the city there was also a malefic star. Aya. Hearing what he said, Li Yunqin thought for a while. You mean a malefic star wandered in the city for a while and then wandered outside the city for a while? Your Majesty, you are so wise. The chicken spirit nodded like pecking rice. He wanted to kill me when he saw me. Fortunately, I ran away fast. Now he is in the city again. Aya, searching everywhere. Did he use talismans or swords? The chicken spirit blinked. Both. He stabbed me with a sword and wrote in his hand. Those who used talismans were from Dao Tong and those who used swords were from Kenzo. Those who used both were wild Taoists. But these days, the divine dragon cult in the vicinity of Nanshan Hill was very popular. There were hundreds of foolish men and foolish women who came to the divine dragon cult. Such a strong power of faith made the cultivation of those few little demons increase a little. According to the level of human cultivators, the chicken spirit was now at the peak of the artistic realm. It was the same reason that he used to level up in games. It was always easy to improve at a lower level. A demon at the peak of the artistic realm could transform into a human form, although it was just an illusion. This kind of demon was not a newly formed evil spirit that did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. To the unruly Taoists, it was already a very strong opponent. But how could he chase the chicken spirit to this state? Li Yunqin thought for a while and smiled. Okay, take me to have a look. He knew someone came to the city of Wei, from the sky. He had his own source of information. It was not only limited to these few demons. Logically speaking, there should not be anyone who was not part of his plan, at least one kind of people. So what happened today should be very interesting. Today's city of Wei was complicated with all kinds of forces. He was walking on a tightrope, even more dangerous than when he was between the 9th young master and Lu Ling. He didn't really like this kind of secretive life, but he didn't like turning into a corpse after doing something spectacular. Well, if he died now he would not even leave a corpse. Are you kidding? Who did not like the life of being respected by all? But he had to deal with these people and these things. The jade slip of enlightenment was what Dao Tong and Kenzo wanted. Li Yunqin should be on their list now. If he really showed his face and made a name for himself, endless troubles would come. No matter how strong he was, he could not fight against Dao Tong and Kenzo alone. But from another point of view, Dao Tong and Kenzo would not do their best to deal with him alone. That kind of huge thing could affect the whole body. Many things did not depend on whether it could be done, but whether it was worth it. Since his parents were still being hunted after living in seclusion for more than 10 years, it meant that the jade slip of enlightenment was quite worth it in the eyes of Dao Tong and Kenzo. But there seemed to be a bottom line. Otherwise there would not be a few Taoists looking for it in private. If Dao Tong and Kenzo mobilized all the forces in the world to do this, no matter how powerful his parents were, they would not be able to hide for more than 10 years. So in order to be able to show his face in public in the future, he needed to know how much Dao Tong and Kenzo were willing to pay for this jade slip of enlightenment. The previous price was a few cultivators of the Lingshu sword sect. It seemed that they did not care. Then it was the genius girl Lu Ling who was at the peak of the transcendent state in the Langya cave. But Li Yunqin knew that it was not enough. After plotting against Lu Ling, he had thought that today would be the day when a stronger cultivator would come. It was a pleasant surprise that he got this body of Qi when he had accidentally integrated into another force. Demons. If he used it properly, it would be a big backer. What he needed to do now was to kill this cultivator in the city of Wei. At the moment, Li Yunqin only knew that such a person had come to the city of Wei, but he did not even know whether it was a man or a woman, old or young. He also did not know whether he liked this person's character. But he only knew one thing. This person had to die. Moreover, he had to die a tragic and unexpected death. In the 36 paradises and 72 sects, there were no more than 1,000 cultivators who were above the enlightened master realm and below the perfect harmony master realm. And there were no more than 100 cultivators who were above the profound realm. These people were scattered among the 108 paradises, and they were already treasures. So he planned to kill an enlightened master in the city of Wei to show them. As long as the decision-makers of Daotong and Kenzo were not immature, they would realize how painful it was, how strong he was, and how much they would have to pay if they wanted to continue to take the jade slip of enlightenment. Sure, there would be more profound realm cultivators coming to kill him. But they would also understand that he would not let them die quietly and the whole world would know about it. Li Yunxin did not know what Daotong and Kenzo were afraid of, but he knew that they did not want to see this matter become a big deal. So they would change to a relatively gentle way. For example, by playing tricks or scheming. At that time it would mean that he would be recognized as a feudal lord by Daotong and Kenzo. But the premise was that the enlightened master had to die. This would be a huge and meticulous project. Right now he had only just built the framework and wanted to take a look at the extra screw in the framework. Li Yunxin returned to the Dragon King Temple and the Taoshi Road, which had become a ruin. He did not have many emotions in his heart. The ruins were still ruins and they would remain ruins for a long time to come. Manpower was very slow and grass had already sprouted between the broken walls. Some homeless people found houses in the ruins that had not completely collapsed, and did not seem worried that the houses would collapse while they were sleeping. Li Yunxin walked around the ruins for a while, and then called the chicken spirit out of the city to patrol the mountains. Some people were discussing the miraculous things that they had seen in the vicinity today. They said that a handsome young Taoist had caught a ghost from a haunted house in broad daylight. Then he seemed to have fought with some kind of evil and showed off his power. This was exactly what the chicken spirit had said. According to him, at that time he had transformed into a red-crowned and colorful rooster, and was walking around the city of Wei, following Li Yunxin's instructions to see if there were any high-level Taoist. He saw a handsome young man waving a willow branch in his hand, walking along the street. He did not seem very happy and his brows were tightly furrowed as if everyone on the street owed him money. Then the young man stopped in front of an inn. This was a fairly prosperous inn and there were people going in and out of it at that time. He stood in front of the door and stared at the two doors of the inn for a while, and then walked in without saying a word to the waiter. Coincidentally, a scholar carrying a sword passed by him, and the young man pulled out the sword from the scholar's waist. The sword was also a good sword, and its value was equivalent to a month's expenses for an average family in the city. How could the scholar let go of his sword so easily? He only paused for a while and without fear of what the young man would do, he pounced on him to take his sword. But the young man did not even look at him and with one kick he sent the scholar flying 5 or 6 steps away. The crowd was in an uproar and thought that he was a martial arts madman, robbing and committing murder in broad daylight on the streets of the old city, and perhaps he would swing his sword at the next moment. Who knew that the young man only took the sword and raised his hand to nail the door of the inn. With a thud, the sword was inserted into the door. The waiter of the inn immediately felt heartache and took a deep breath. This was a century-old inn and there was a pair of door gods carved on both sides of the door, and they looked very lifelike. It was said that it was made by a master in the early years, and after that master passed away, the value of this pair of door gods increased. Everyone who came and went knew that there was an allusion to this door, and it slowly became a sign of this inn. Now the young Taoist's sword was inserted into the forehead of the door god, and even if the sword was pulled out there would be a big hole, so how could the waiter not feel heartache? The waiter saw the innkeeper shouting and the innkeeper also felt heartache and took a deep breath, and hurriedly ordered someone to report it to the authorities. But at this time the young Taoist frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Still not coming out?" This shout was like a spring thunder. The people around him felt their ears go numb from the sound. They didn't understand how this seemingly ordinary young man could make such a sound. And after this shout, the corner of the young man's mouth also bled. It was as if he had also broken his own throat with that shout. But he did not care and only shouted with a hoarse voice, "Come out." After this shout, more blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Who had ever seen a guy who only shouted twice and broke his own throat? It was as if this body did not belong to him and he did not cherish it at all. He only treated it as a piece of clothing, as if he needed to change it at any time. But soon, people's attention was no longer on this young Taoist. A cloud of black gas from the statue of the door god on the door slowly gushed out. Then under the clear sky and bright sky, a strange whirlwind appeared on the ground. Then that cloud of black gas suddenly shrunk, fell to the ground and grew with the wind. In just a breath's time, it turned into a big ghost with a green face and sharp fangs. This sudden change almost scared the people to death. Some people were speechless and their faces were full of fear and they turned around to escape. Some people could not move and only felt their legs go weak and their crotches became hot and wet. Some people did not even feel anything and fainted on the ground with their legs together. But just as these people were about to escape, the young Taoist priest had already pulled out the sword that was stuck in the door with a flip of his hand. He held the sword in his right hand and with his left hand he wrote a talisman in the air. This sword suddenly shone with a golden light, as if it had just been taken out of a blacksmith's furnace. Then the Taoist slashed with the sword. The big ghost with a green face and sharp fangs immediately turned into a puddle of stinking black water, splashing on the ground. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Only now did people realize that they had met an expert. They trembled and retreated a few steps and then started to shout. They had eyes but did not recognize Mount Tai, and were lucky to have met an expert to slay the demon and so on. But the young Taoist did not even look at them and only threw the sword away, and with a hoarse voice he said to himself, "Is this still usable?" It was another tattered body. "If I can't find a good and usable one, After saying this he raised his hands to support his face. He quickly applied force. A cracking sound. The young Taoist broke his own neck. Everyone was stunned. After being stunned for a while, someone walked forward in disbelief and checked his breath. He was really dead. Chapter 139. At this point, even mortals could see what was happening. However, only the chicken spirit could see what was happening next. A ball of green light rose from the Taoist's body and trembled in the air before turning into a green Taoist. However, this Taoist priest was extremely ugly and his stature was short. His expression was cold and arrogant, as if he was the best in the world. The combination of these two made for a comical scene. Although the chicken spirit could transform into a human and speak human language, it was still not a human. It had sentience, but it was like a child. It thought of its King Li's handsome appearance and momentarily forgot itself. It chuckled at the Taoist soul. So ugly. So ugly. What a short-legged ghost. The Taoist only took one look at him and knew that he was a demon with sentience, but he didn't take it to heart. However, when he heard this he was enraged. He slapped the back of his head and spat out a small green sword that grew in his hand. Then he formed a seal with his left hand and slashed at the chicken spirit. The chicken spirit panicked and ran away while the Taoist's soul chased after it. Although the chicken spirit's cultivation was shallow, it was still a winged creature and had a body. The Taoist's magic power was considered strong, but he had lost his body and was under the scorching sun. As time went by, the chicken spirit actually chased him all the way out of Wei City. Only then did the Taoist's soul want to retreat. The chicken spirit was also scared and said, "Grandpa, don't chase me anymore, don't chase me anymore. You're so handsome, don't let the wind blow your mouth out of shape." Hearing this, the Taoist stopped and said to the chicken spirit, "The next time I see you, little demon, I'll definitely kill you." Li Yunxin realized that the chicken spirit dared to play tricks on him. It was clearly the chicken spirit who made the mistake first. Although killing someone because of a disagreement wasn't something a Taoist master would do, according to the chicken spirit's description, the Taoist's soul wasn't a righteous person. In truth, even the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo were mostly a bunch of mentally ill reservists. He did not take it to heart, he just wanted to see what kind of deity could actually use the techniques of Daotong and Kenzo together. So he walked to the front of the inn. Many people had already gathered here, and they were all discussing the miraculous events of yesterday. However, the puddle of stinky liquid at the place where the big ghost was killed yesterday had not been cleaned up, so the stench in front of the inn was already unbearable. The shopkeeper frowned and said that he had tried many methods such as splashing water on it, burning it with fire. But the puddle of stinky water refused to disperse. Now that the smell was getting stronger and stronger, the guests in the inn all wanted to return their rooms and money. His heart ached so much that he got 3 blisters in one night. Li Yunxin stood in the crowd and stared at the stinky water. He understood what it was. That young Taoist priest was very strong. This stinky water was actually something similar to his Qi Wen's godhead. For hundreds of years, people believed that there was a door god on this door. Even if they did not believe it, they would think, Ah, maybe there really is one in their hearts. Then there would be ghosts possessing the body and receiving the power of wish. Over time, people thought that there was a god on this door, and there was indeed a Yin god on this door. So was this Yin god a real door god or a fake one? In between these two blurry boundaries, it became something similar to Qi Wen's emptiness. But for thousands of years, no cultivator had any ideas about this thing. First, you had to turn yourself into a soul. But turning into a soul would cause your mind to be damaged, and you would no longer be your former self. And from a ghost to a ghost cultivator, it was a rather long process, and if you were not careful, your soul would be destroyed. And finally, this emptiness was created by people's belief. It was not as stable as Qi Wen's godhead. Once there was no one to believe in it, it would be gone. But today, that young Taoist priest not only killed the big ghost attached to this emptiness, but also directly dismantled that emptiness, which was this stinky water. But even though it was dismantled, Li Yunxin was not out of ideas. He was not sure about other demons, but since he was Qi Wen and his origin was somewhat similar to this emptiness, he had a deeper understanding of it. And this deeper understanding was enough for him to comprehend some methods to accomplish this. This was probably the God-given ability of demons and divine beasts. Some things could be understood instinctively without the need for cultivation. But he was not in a hurry to act and instead waited in the crowd for a while. More than half of the criminals would not be able to resist returning to the scene after committing the crime, and blend in with the crowd to take a look. Although this wasn't a crime, but according to the chicken spirit's description of that person, he would probably return to take a look. Unfortunately, he miscalculated this time. After waiting for half an hour, there was still no future. However, this miscalculation seemed to have given him a deeper understanding of that person. But in that person's future there was something else. This street was called Guqing Street, but in fact it used to be called Guqing Street. The name, Guqing Street, had been used for nearly 200 or 300 years, until the former capital of the city of Wei was conquered. At the end of this street was the abandoned palace of the city of Wei. The abandoned palace, as the name suggested, was an abandoned palace. When the city was conquered, the Qing army massacred the city for 3 days before stopping. Because of the fierce resistance of the former royal family, they suffered many losses. So after killing the emperor in the Golden Palace and stealing the treasures, they burned the palace down. Unfortunately, there was more than one Daqing state in the world. Although the cultivators did not say a word, the royal families of other countries strongly condemned this atrocity. There were always disputes in the world, and there were always wars between countries. In fact, the royal families and aristocratic families of different countries all had marriages with each other, and they were implicated. If a country was destroyed, even the royal family was not spared, then the world would be in chaos. The founder of the Qing kingdom killed General Fan Wei, who had ordered the massacre. But everyone knew that without the approval of the emperor, no one would have the guts to kill the emperor in the Golden Palace and burn the old capital. General Fan Wei was also born in a family of officials, so he did not know the taboo. But in the end he made his stand and the matter gradually subsided. But because of this, the ruins of the palace had not been touched. It was regarded as the mausoleum of the last emperor of the former dynasty, who was first killed in the palace, and then burned down by the fire. Thus, the Guqing Street leading to the abandoned palace slowly became the Guqing Street. The city of Wei was a big city, and it used to be the capital of the country. So the people of the city of Wei always had a different complex in their hearts. Back then, the city of Wei was the capital of the country for nearly 1,000 years. The capital was only a few hundred years. Li Yunxin could understand this kind of thinking. And now, under the bright sky on this Guqing Street full of pedestrians, a group of Yin spirits came. The one in front was an armored soldier on horseback. His face was like a melted candle, looking ferocious and terrifying, as if he had been burned alive when he was alive. He held a big spear in his hand. The spearhead was decorated with black tassels. Behind him were 5 soldiers, all wearing armor. But the armor was full of scars, as if he had been killed when he was alive. His face was also ferocious and terrifying, as if he had been burned together with the armored soldier on horseback. Such a group of Yin spirits passed through the crowd on the Guqing Street, openly passing through. Everywhere they passed, the pedestrians shivered, thinking that someone was talking about them behind their back. But no one could see them. Chapter 140. The 16 spirits walked to the front of the inn. The ferocious soldier reined in his horse and stared at the puddle of black water. Then he looked at the puncture marks on the door. After observing for a while, he turned around and sat on his horse before asking Li Yunxin, "Do you know the details of this inn spirit?" Li Yunxin looked at him with interest. He didn't answer but asked, "I used to live in the city of Wei. But I don't know you. What is this?" The soldier saw Li Yunxin's calm expression and knew he wasn't an ordinary ghost. So his tone softened a little. "I'm the 5th Bo Yu, the general of the Golden Guards of Weidu. Today I came here to investigate after I learned that people of Weidu were killed." Li Yunxin clapped his hands with his folding fan and said, "Oh, you're the 5th general. Sorry for not recognizing you. Well, this is what happened. There was a stinky Taoist who came here to poke a door and a big ghost came out. Then he killed him. After that he committed suicide. Only a wisp of ghost was left and no one knows where it went. Now there's a puddle of water in front of the inn. We can't do business anymore. It's really harmful." When Li Yunxin was talking to the general of the Golden Guards of Weidu, he was standing in the crowd. When he finished talking, there was already a small empty space beside him. He was a handsome scholar standing on the street and talking to the air. Previously, a big ghost was found in this door, and before that there was a battle between demons and cultivators in the city of Wei. Everyone was already in a state of panic. Seeing him like this, they immediately thought, "It's a ghost again." But Li Yunxin didn't care at all. He just kept talking. "That's not necessary. It's just that I feel like old friends with you. It must be fate. Although you and I are different, we are both in spirits. I happen to have an idea." At this time, people were guessing whether he was really talking to a ghost or a lunatic. He raised his head slightly and stared at the sky. He listened for a while and shook his head with a smile. "Well said. My master is Miss Bai Yunxin." "Oh. AI, there's no need to mention my real name. My young Miss Bai calls me Li Yunxin." After saying this, he turned around and walked to the door of the inn. The last person who did this made the doorway stink. So this time the innkeeper mustered up his courage and stood in front of him, trembling with fear. You, what do you want?" Li Yunxin frowned and sneered, "Mortal, you really don't know death. I want to help you get rid of this disaster and you dare to make excuses? If you don't move aside, you'll be like this." After saying that, he waved his hand. With a swish, 5 deep claw marks appeared on a red wooden pillar in front of the inn. The wooden pillar was almost cut in half. The innkeeper was stunned for a while. He stared at Li Yunxin's hand and heard a creaking sound coming from the roof. He ran straight into the crowd. Li Yunxin snorted and frowned as he looked at the puddle of stinky water. Then he waved his hand and the black water, like water stains on a red-hot soldering iron, sizzled and quickly disappeared. After a while, even the stench was gone. After doing all this, he turned around and looked at the soldier on the horse. "I've put it in place. General, you can rest assured." The ferocious-looking soldier frowned and stared at Li Yunxin. "Your Excellency is so powerful that I've never heard of you. Who are you?" Li Yunxin smiled. "Go back and ask your king. You'll know." After saying this, he ignored the soldier and turned to look at the people on the street. After looking carefully, he finally found the innkeeper in the crowd. With a wave of his hand, a gust of evil wind wrapped around the innkeeper. Seeing this, the people immediately screamed and ran away, dispersing from the street. But perhaps the supernatural things that happened in the city had gradually made these people used to it. They didn't run far but hid in the street corners or behind trees looking out. The innkeeper was trembling like a sieve. He didn't know what to say, so he could only say, "Grandpa, spare me. Hero, spare me. King, spare me." Li Yunxin stared at him for a while, smiled evilly and threw him to the ground. After a few steps, he suddenly turned his head, but his face was full of anger. "I helped you get rid of that puddle of stinky water. Why are you afraid of me, huh? Why are you afraid of me?" The innkeeper just trembled, holding his head, and didn't say anything. Li Yunxin was angry again. "Why don't you speak? Why don't you ask my name so that you can repay me in the future? Don't you say that people understand etiquette best? If you don't ask me, I'll eat. I'll kill you." Hearing his words, anyone with a clear mind would know that he wasn't a human. The words, "I'll eat you," almost slipped out of his mouth. The innkeeper might be scared, and he really asked in a trembling voice, "King, what's your name? I'll prepare 3 animals in the future." He wanted to say, Please come and enjoy. But he was afraid that if he really came he would suffer. Fortunately, Li Yunxin was happy after hearing this. The anger on his face suddenly disappeared and he smiled. Listen, I'm a follower of the dragon cult. Dragon cult, do you know? In these days some people in the city of Wei did know that there was a dragon cult by the Dongting Lake. But most people still didn't know. Hearing his words, the innkeeper was a little confused, and those hiding in the distance didn't even know what the dragon cult was. He got angry again and grabbed the innkeeper. Are you clear about it, Then he stared at those people in the distance. Today the dragon cult will eliminate the disaster for you, do you understand? If you say something wrong in the future I'll... Speaking of this, he suddenly grinned from ear to ear, showing 2 rows of white sharp fangs, and gave a shrill and horrible shout. Eat them all. Even the boldest people didn't dare to look at this scene anymore. He might be a demon, and he really is a demon were 2 completely different things. A group of people screamed and ran away, and the windows of the houses facing the street were closed with a clatter. The innkeeper had already fainted because of fear. In the blink of an eye, only Li Yunxin was left in the middle of the street. He snorted, walked a few steps into an alley and waved his sleeves. A cloud appeared from the ground and carried him up to the sky. But the problem was, it was daytime. A cloud appeared in the city and went straight to the sky. Who couldn't see it? The person in the cloud seemed to be aware of this. He snorted angrily in the air and suddenly turned back and disappeared in the city of Wei. After a quarter of an hour, a child beggar staggered to the door of the previous inn. The innkeeper had been rescued. He leaned against the pillar of his own house and kept sighing, saying how could he attract so many demons in a day. Some busybodies asked him what happened at that time. The innkeeper said slowly while pretending to be pretentious, which made people stare at him. The child beggar listened to him. After hearing that, she suddenly started giggling. Well, what a stupid imposter monster. Doesn't fit and this one doesn't fit either. Why don't you try the monster? Chapter 141. The beggar said with a smile and immediately ran towards the direction where the cloud landed. Although the city of Wei couldn't be compared to the cities with millions or tens of millions of people in the future, it was still a famous city praised by people of this era. Although the beggar's legs were as fast as the wind and it only took him half an hour to get there, he didn't find anything except a group of stunned and panic-stricken people. Everyone said that there was indeed a person who landed here. He was very handsome. How could a demon be so good-looking? He must be an immortal who came to the city of Wei to kill the demon. Some said that the person's dressing and clothes were very familiar. He looked like the Taoist who was walking around in the city of Wei. It was said that the Taoist made a miraculous thing like a river full of sour soup. Hearing this, some people exclaimed, I do remember him. These words spread quickly and were heard by the beggars. Originally he just wanted to find a stupid demon to change his skin. But after hearing these things he calmed down and frowned. Because he still remembered the reason why he came to the city of Wei with Yunzi. After thinking for a while, the beggar slowly walked away and returned to the residence of the Xianxia Danding sect. Naturally, there were some servants who didn't recognize him and blocked his way. He killed them with a wave of his hand. Yunzi was sitting on the couch and looking at the sky and clouds outside the window. Seeing the beggar came in, he smiled bitterly. You broke your body again. The beggar snorted. Is good-looking but useless. He only said a few words and his throat broke. That's really troublesome for me. Originally, I wanted to replace him with a stupid demon, but I found something strange. Yunzi liked the way the other party was acting, calm and rational instead of flying into a rage. So he praised him carefully. Oh? I knew it wouldn't be that simple when you said you wanted to go out and play. You really gained a lot. What is going on? The beggar was even happier after being praised. He squinted his eyes and smiled. He jumped onto the table and sat in front of Yunzi. His left hand brushed aside the messy hair hanging in front of his face, and his right hand grabbed the dried fruit on the table and put it into his mouth. As he ate, he talked about what he had seen and heard. Yunzi listened attentively, closed his eyes and thought for a while before letting out a sigh. He's a tough one to deal with. Who? That stupid demon? Heh. That monster is indeed stupid. Yunzi pondered for a while and said that Bai Yunxing would come to Daotong every few decades to make a ruckus, for that feather coat of hers. Therefore he more or less understood her. She had a servant girl by her side. Even now, I don't know what her original identity is, but she has some skills. You said that the monster scared people on the street today and claimed to be a member of the dragon cult. His style is indeed that of a demon, but this matter doesn't seem to be the intention of a demon. The beggar frowned. What are you thinking about? Do I have to think about so many things again? A sinister plot? You really think too much. Yunzi smiled. Have I ever miscalculated? The beggar twitched his mouth, but he couldn't say anything to refute, so he continued to eat his fruit. This is a plot within a plot. Yunzi let out a long sigh. Those who are simple-minded will only see the first layer. That demon is a member of the dragon cult, so the dragon cult is not a good person, so they should stay far away from them. Those with a deeper mind would have noticed something unusual. For example, although this demon seems to do whatever he wants people to remember that he is a member of the dragon cult. This is too deliberate. So he is doing it on purpose. He deliberately pretends to be fierce so that people will be afraid of the dragon cult. Then, he is actually an enemy of the so-called dragon cult and he wants to do something bad to them. The beggar thought for a while, then slapped the table. What you said makes sense. Yunzi twirled his beard, smiled, then shook his head. But this is only the second layer. The flaw of the second layer is too obvious. That person deliberately wants us to think of the second layer. Normally, when people think that there is a deeper meaning to this matter, they will become complacent and self-satisfied, and they won't think about it any further. In fact, that person should really be a member of the dragon cult. The beggar thought for a while, then frowned. Then why did he do all this? Since he is really a member of the dragon cult, why did he pretend to be a member of the dragon cult? Yunzi smiled. That person wants us to think that he is an enemy of the dragon cult. He must know your whereabouts. Then we will be interested in him and we will want to see who is on our side. Then, he can take the opportunity to get in touch with us and get some information from us. The reason I put on a show was because I wanted to make it more realistic. When the time comes, as soon as you tell him the second meaning, he will play dumb and say, "Oh, you saw through me." In this way we can trust him even more. After saying this, Yunzi was silent for a while. He said that the man bared his teeth on the street and said that he wanted to eat people. She can also fly in the sky. Then she should be Bai Yunxin's servant girl. In the past few days I've sent people to investigate in the city. That night, more than one person saw a demon that looked like Li Yunxin in the ruins of the Dragon King Temple. With one palm, it smashed Li Yunxin's corpse and disappeared without a trace. From the looks of it, that fiendish demon is this fiendish demon. I previously deduced that the dragon cult is related to Lord Dongting and Bai Yunxin. Now, from the looks of it, the fiendish demon you saw might be Bai Yunxin's servant girl. How can a great demon that can fly in the sky not be famous? There is only one. After hearing him say so much, the beggar felt dizzy. He impatiently threw the dried fruit in his hand on the ground. Tell me more clearly what happened. Simply put, it is very likely that Bai Yunxin put on a show to mislead us. To make us think that he is an enemy of the dragon cult. Then he took the opportunity to gain our trust, and instigated a fight between us and Lord Dongting. When Yunzi said this, he shook his head slightly. But according to you, you killed the big demon in the sect and that person came an hour later. Once he came, he put on such a good show. It was completely an impromptu idea. Such quick wit, although not as good as mine, is worthy of the word scheming. Hey, if that's the case, let's play with her. She wants to find out the truth about us. You just pretend to be fooled and tell her. That kind of person will definitely show you some flaws on purpose. Then I can find out their inside story. In the end, I will make them regret that they played such tricks on me. They really don't know the meaning of death. After hearing this, the beggar's eyes brightened. Good. I'm willing to do this. But if it's done, then the fiendish demon will go with you. The beggar laughed and ran out like a gust of wind. Chapter 142. 2 days later, the beggar finally found the man who called himself Li Yunxin. He was sitting in a branch of the Southwood restaurant in the north of the city, drinking wine. The street was lit up and there were young men and women. Li Yunxin held a small wine cup and rubbed it against his lips, looking at the pedestrians on the street lazily. Occasionally he smelled the aroma of snacks on the street and tossed a few taels of silver to the waiter, asking him to buy them. Soon, the table in front of him was filled with all kinds of food looking very sumptuous. But he didn't eat, only sipping the wine as if he was waiting for someone. The beggar walked over as if there was no one else around, sat in front of Li Yunxin casually, grabbed the food on the table and started eating. Seeing this, the waiter hurried over to chase him away, but Li Yunxin smiled and waved his hand. "This is a friend. It's okay." The beggar glanced at him and continued to eat. When he was full, he burped and stared at Li Yunxin carefully. "You're an interesting demon." Li Yunxin was slightly stunned and frowned. "What?" Seeing him like this, the beggar felt a bit proud and said, "You knew that I was looking for you these days, so you deliberately exposed your whereabouts so that I could find you. Now you're waiting for me here. I'm here, say what you want to say." Li Yunxin was stunned again and slowly put down the wine cup. "I don't know what you're talking about. See you later." After that, he stood up and was about to leave. The beggar didn't stop him and sneered, "If you leave like this, how will you explain to your Miss Spy when you get back?" Li Yunxin's body froze. The beggar laughed again. "You put on a show for us on the street. Did you think we couldn't see through you? You said you're a disciple of the dragon cult, but in my opinion, you're the enemy of the dragon cult, right?" At this moment, Li Yunxin didn't seem to be afraid of the boiling water anymore. He turned around and looked at the beggar, then sat back at the table and curled his lips. "Oh? What do you mean?" The beggar proudly told him about the second level that Yunzi had told him about. After he said it, Li Yunxin raised her eyebrows as expected. "Oh, you actually saw through me." Everything was as Yunzi expected. Even the words he said were shockingly similar. The beggar smiled faintly and did not reply. Li Yunxin smiled as well. "If that's the case, I won't hide it anymore. I'm sure you've already guessed my identity. The reason why I put on such a show to test you is to see if you are a smart person worth befriending. My master has a treasure in that person's hands that he must have. And this treasure is inextricably linked to you. However, my master doesn't want to cause any more trouble. He just wants to take that treasure and return as soon as possible. Oh, you should be clear about this. So in this matter we can be friends." The beggar smiled when he heard that. "Be friends? Your master killed Fairy Ling Kong of Daotong. How can we be friends?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while. He poured himself a cup of wine and drank it all. He squinted at the beggar and smiled. "Why play dumb? You and I both know that Fairy Ling Kong is not dead. As for why she is not dead and where she is now, I don't think I need to tell you, right? Right now my master wants that item. You want Fairy Ling Kong. Oh, you also want the jade slip of enlightenment that was originally in Dragon Sun's hands. So we each take what we need and kill that Lord Dongting. Isn't that perfect?" The beggar squinted his eyes. "You actually know about the jade slip of enlightenment." Li Yunxin just tilted his head and did not speak. The beggars were already 80 to 90% convinced by his actions. Because no one else could know so many secrets. The feather robe, the jade slip of enlightenment and the not dead Lu Ling. So on such a night the two people, each with their own ulterior motives, reached a seemingly unbreakable relationship of trust. The beggar answered the words of the jade slip of enlightenment. Li Yunxin smiled. "I don't just know. I also know that in order to find the jade slip, you have killed some people. But," he pointed at himself. "I escaped." Although the beggar was surly, he was not stupid. After a moment of surprise, he looked at Li Yunxin and smiled evilly. "Tell me, why did you disguise yourself like this?" "Oh, that Li Yunxin is actually so beautiful. It's a pity that I didn't see him at that time." Li Yunxin was stunned for a while. But this time, it was the genuine stupidity. His mind was filled with alarm. It was this person. On the night of the thunderstorm, the person who made his parents suddenly disappear. Ah. He let out a long and light sigh in his heart. "I finally found you, my friend." The mysterious person who killed his parents did not show up, and he felt that the person was always hiding in the shadows. But now, he actually presented himself in front of him. After being stunned for a while, Li Yunxin put down the wine cup on his lips. "My master likes Li Yunxin. Oh, he likes his taste." Li Yunxin smiled warmly. His arms were close to his ribs and his hands were crossed. He sat obediently. He is also very pitiful. It is said that his parents, well, he said that they were plotted against. He said that his parents were very powerful, but they were killed by a sneak attack from a villain. When he heard this, he felt that he was even more interesting. It's a pity that he died later, so he asked me to transform into his appearance. When he said this, he was looking at the beggar's reaction. He saw that he was proud at first, but when he heard sneak attack from a villain, he frowned and wanted to say something but stopped. When he found out that Li Yunxin only said this and then changed the topic to talk about his master, he was even more unhappy. Li Yunxin knew that this guy was very eager for him to mention what happened that night, or at least to say a few more words so that he could defend himself. To immediately defend himself because of the words, sneak attack from a villain, would make him seem impatient, which was not the behavior of a master. But he didn't say it. Instead, he rambled on about some meaningless things, which only made the beggar more unhappy. For example, he praised Li Yunxin for being loyal, honest, handsome, smart, elegant. Then he persuaded the beggar to drink a few cups of wine. It was night time and there was an oil lamp on the table. As Li Yunxin spoke, he held his chin with his left hand and moved the oil lamp with his right hand, making the flame flicker, as if it was following a certain pattern. The light, the brightness, the sound of the oil lamp sliding on the table, the rhythm of his words, his eyes and his movements. In the end, it made the beggar, who was already annoyed and unwilling, even more annoyed. Then Li Yunxin smiled and shook his head slightly. My mistress said that the person who killed his parents that night should also have great abilities. When such words fell into the beggar's ears, the annoyance in his heart seemed to be suppressed in an instant. What does this little maid know? Big Monster by Yunxin is really knowledgeable. Such a short period of happiness suddenly appeared in his heart, and his mood also became exceptionally good because of this sudden temporary relief. The words, great abilities, finally drew out all the words that were hidden in his heart that he didn't know whether he should say or not. Thus he laughed, **T. Let me tell you, I was the one who killed Li Yunxin's parents. I won the battle openly from 1,000 miles away. Chapter 143. Li Yunxin was silent for a moment, then he smiled. This is the first time I've heard of this. We've talked for so long, but I don't know how to address you. The beggar smiled arrogantly and stood up from the table. He was originally a teenager of 12 or 13 years old, but after drinking a few glasses of wine, the prodigal son had become a hero. He now looked a bit heroic. Call me Qing Liangzi. The beggar said, remember, my Taoist name is Qing Liangzi. Even though I change my appearance often, my name will never change. Li Yunxin smiled demurely. Qing Liangzi. Which grotto heaven's name is that? Qing Liangzi coughed. I'm not from the grotto heaven. Then you must be an expert from a sect. Also a deity. Qing Liangzi frowned slightly. Not a sect either. Although the candlelight was dim, Li Yunxin had keenly captured the change of expression on this mysterious Qing Liangzi's face. Especially when he drank and his control over his facial muscles became weaker. It was a very familiar expression, and he had seen it more than once in his previous life. For example, during a blind date, a girl from a small town kept bragging to a man who returned from the capital and had an annual salary of 500,000 yuan that she earned 3,000 yuan a month. She was considered an elite in the local society, and looked at the silent man with a contemptuous and arrogant expression. Li Yunxin saw the expression on Qing Liangzi's face that a man should have. This made him feel astonished. In his opinion, even though Qing Liangzi wasn't a very normal person, he was more normal than all the cultivators he had met. Perhaps because they needed to go through the heavenly tribulation, almost all the cultivators in Daotong and Kenzhou had very serious psychological problems. And this psychological problem was caused by their abandonment of lust, which was a high-end and grand method. A normal person must have emotions and desires. If one day a person suddenly lost interest in everything and felt bored, then Li Yunxin would say that this person might have depression. However, for many cultivators, this was just a heavenly tribulation and a kind of emotion. He was a normal person to begin with. Even if he cultivated, he would still be a normal person with magical powers. It would be strange if he didn't have a psychological problem. But this was the tradition of cultivators. Daotong and Kenzhou had their own set of methods that allowed cultivators with serious psychological problems to survive for thousands of years. Moreover, their lives were much better than those of ordinary people. After all, the cultivators had their own little society. Under specific rules and order, they could form a small world that was different from a normal person's. However, this quantum master Qing, so far he had been acting too much like a normal person. There was indeed something wrong with him. He had a slight tendency to act out his personality. Li Yunxin was more familiar with this kind of personality. He liked to use exaggerated words and deeds to attract others' attention, and at the same time he would use his emotions too much. In fact, it could be inaccurately and crudely described as severe chinibu. Li Yunxin, who had self-diagnosed himself as a high-energy antisocial and a performative personality, knew very well that the expression on Qing Liangzi's face meant that he believed in the depths of his heart that his background was higher than that of a sect. Even higher than that of a grotto heaven. But this Qing Liangzi wasn't a fool who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He came together with a high-level grotto heaven cultivator. So, what was his background? So, Li Yunxin's face revealed a vivid look of sympathy and contempt, as if he was trying hard to suppress it. It's nothing. Heroes don't ask about their background, although you're not from a grotto heaven sect, but you? Qing Liangzi snorted coldly and interrupted him. What's the big deal about Daotong and Kenzo? I know all the cultivation methods of those trash. Let's dual cultivate. Those people think that they have the most orthodox cultivation methods in the world. They think that every secret technique of the grotto heaven and the sect is a secret that can't be passed on, and they're afraid that others will learn it. He curled his lips and looked at Li Yunxin. We have all of them. Li Yunxin's face showed just the right amount of dullness, and then it quickly turned into a look of deep doubt. It was the kind of disappointed look that said, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Well, about this, hee. Then which grotto heaven's elder is in the base? Qing Liangzi frowned angrily and didn't let him change the topic. You don't believe me? What kind of knowledge do you have, little demon? Let me ask you, do you know the phrase, in the same boat? Have you ever heard of the Freemasonry? This was the third time tonight that he made Li Yunxin really stunned. His heart was in turmoil and there was also a big drum beating in his heart. The ferocious waves slammed into the drum, causing his expression to change. Of course he had heard of the Freemasonry. That was in another world. It was an organization that seemed to be overly interpreted and mysterious. Of course it seemed. According to his limited knowledge, it was a huge and mysterious religious organization that was said to have a history of thousands of years. It appeared in England in the 18th century, and its literal name was Freemasonry. It claimed to pursue the will of human survival and understand the mysteries of heaven and earth and the universe. There were many rumors about this organization that sounded ridiculous, but Li Yunxin knew that a lot of things that sounded ridiculous were actually very ridiculous and couldn't be true. But he quickly suppressed the fluctuations in his heart and just calmly shook his head slightly. Never heard of it, Freemasonry? Interesting name. Is it from the meaning of in the same boat? Is it a carpenter society that builds ships? He shouldn't have talked about carpenter. It would be too abrupt. But he had to take the risk. Qing Liangzi's origin was mysterious, and he indeed mastered the methods of Daotong and Kenzo at the same time. The reason why cultivators didn't practice both was because it was said that it would cause people to be possessed by the devil and eventually die. It was common knowledge that people couldn't practice incense and power of will. But this guy subverted it. And he mentioned a name that he was very familiar with. Li Yunxin knew that he wasn't the only one with a similar, special identity in this world. Therefore, even if there was the phrase in the same boat, the name of the Freemasonry was strange. He didn't believe in coincidences. The Freemasonry was Freemasonry, so he said they were in the same boat because of the two words in the same boat. Observe Qing Liangzi's reaction. Seeing Qing Liangzi, he was stunned at first and then frowned. What carpenter? Don't be disrespectful. What do you know, you demon? Our Freemasonry was established by hundreds of saints who reincarnated from ancient times. Saints live as long as heaven and earth, and are born to understand the mysteries of this primitive universe. The reincarnation of saints is to save the world from a great calamity that is about to come. In the same boat. Qing Liangzi talked for a quarter of an hour without stopping. Li Yunxin realized that this guy had been brainwashed. Chapter 144. Brainwashed was not a derogatory term. Everyone abided by the so-called moral code. Which one of them was not brainwashed? But in this quarter of an hour, Qing Liangzi showed an obvious tendency to be controlled, which was contrary to his nature. It was as if once the topic of Freemasonry was mentioned, he automatically entered a certain mode. His whole person became selfless, great, and full of humanity. This was the second time Li Yunxin encountered such a situation. Last time it was Lu Ling. It seemed that someone had helped her establish a strong psychological defense mechanism. Once the jade slip of enlightenment was touched, her heart would be alarmed, and she would quickly get rid of her irrational state. Although Qing Liangzi's situation was different, Li Yunxin believed that these two things did not seem to be purely coincidental. This world, his peers existed. And he was also a master of manipulating people's minds. Therefore he quickly and decisively used a series of meaningless noises, movements and lights to make Qing Liangzi feel a slight physiological discomfort. Then he used a few obvious suggestive words to distract his attention and quickly pulled him out of his defensive state. But at this moment, the atmosphere became strange and awkward. Li Yunxin tried to talk about other things, such as asking about the situation of the Lord Heavenly Abode. Qing Liangzi quickly spoke without any hesitation. However, when he spoke he became calm and serious, as if he was just doing what Yunzi told him. Li Yunxin also told him about his master. The two talked until late at night. The customers in Southwood restaurant had all left, leaving only the two of them sitting opposite each other under the oil lamp. The table was a mess of cups. In fact, their original goal had been achieved. They each revealed some inside information with an attitude of, let's talk and see what happens. But Li Yunxin knew that Qing Liangzi was already vigilant. This Qing Liangzi was not Dao Tong, nor was he from the heavenly abode. He belonged to a secret organization called Freemasonry. This organization was created by several hundred saints and paragons who reincarnated from the primordial era in order to save the world from a calamity. Li Yunxin believed that some of the things he said were true. For example, those virtuous paragons knew the secret manuals of Dao Tong and Kenzo, and used them to create cultivators like Qing Liangzhu. It was also said that the saints themselves were unfathomable, almost as old as the heavens and the earth. One of them had even lived for 3,000 years. Qing Liangzi had not been frank about these matters, but Li Yunxin had deduced them from the details that he had accidentally revealed. Such an organization, or rather a sect, logically speaking, they should be able to compete with Dao Tong and Kenzo, so why have I never heard of them before? Li Yunxin realized that he might have touched upon a certain core. There should be some incredible secret hidden in the translucent jade slip. Dao Tong and Kenzo were looking for it, and so were the mysterious Tongji society. Therefore, when the two were about to part ways, Li Yunxin asked the same question again. You said that you were going to confront Li Chunfeng and his wife fair and square. What's going on? A sly smile appeared on Qing Liangzi's face. You're a good demon. But I can't tell you now. That Yunzi is probably waiting for me anxiously, so I have to go and answer him first. The beggar stood up, hesitated for a moment, then said, Why are you so concerned about this? You're just a demon. Is your true form male or female? Li Yunxin only looked at him in the candlelight. My master told me to transform into this human form, so I have to care about his past. Then I'll go and answer him first, then I'll talk to you. The beggar pointed at the table. If you want to know something else, wait for me here. I'll be back soon. After saying this, the beggar turned and left, quickly disappearing into the night. Seeing that the beggar had left, the waiter who was lying on the table rubbed his eyes and yawned. He walked over and said, Young master, I'll take this cup away. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and thought for a moment, then shook his head slightly. No need. Tonight. I'll probably have to stay for a while. The waiter's face turned bitter. He smiled apologetically and said, Young master, it's already past midnight. Our shop is also. But Li Yunxin interrupted him. I'm here. As for you, leave quickly if you want to live. Any later and you won't be able to leave. After all, this waiter had seen a lot of the world. After hearing what he said, several possibilities popped up in his head. This person wanted to rob, this person wanted to take revenge, this person was crazy. While thinking about these possibilities, he slowly stepped back. But Li Yunxin ignored him. So he took a few steps back and hurriedly ran behind the tall counter. He shook the shopkeeper awake and told him in detail what happened just now. After all, the shopkeeper was more patient than him. He casually took a heavy ingot of silver from behind the counter and wrapped it in his sleeve. He walked out to take a look. First he cupped his hands to Li Yunxin from afar. "Friend, please. May I know which?" But he couldn't finish his sentence. He could only stare at Li Yunxin with his mouth open and eyes wide. The ingot of silver in his hand fell to the ground. In the corner of the dark hall, on the table illuminated by the oil lamp, the handsome young scholar had already moved his cup to the side, revealing the surface of the table. When they looked, Li Yunxin had already used his finger to draw the outline of an armored soldier riding a horse on the wooden table. Once the drawing was done, he slammed his hand on the table. Immediately a green-haired little soldier on horseback stood up from the table. This little person was only as tall as a palm, and the horse he was riding was like a mouse. Li Yunxin said something in a low voice and the little person shouted at the horse. The horse leapt to the ground and galloped out of the door. Then he grabbed a handful of peanuts from the plate on the table and scattered them on the ground, then blew on them. The peanuts immediately turned into a little person wearing a red helmet and red armor. They were also the size of a palm and held a golden dagger axe in their hands. After making a ruckus for a while, they lined up on the ground next to Li Yunxin. They raised their heads in unison and listened to his instructions. Then they dispersed and ran out of the door. At this time, Li Yunxin raised his head and picked up the wine pot on the table. He drained the remaining wine and drank it in one gulp. "I want to eliminate evil here. And that evil is setting up a formation in the distance. If the two of you don't leave, I'm afraid you'll become ghosts." At this time the shopkeeper and the waiter seemed to wake up from a dream. They didn't even bother to pick up the silver on the ground and ran away. Li Yunxin stood up and went to the back of the counter to get another pot of wine. He wanted to take it slow and make a long-term plan. He didn't know that he accidentally triggered the warning in Qing Liangzi's heart. After the other party left the shop, he cast a spell to seal off the street entrance. This meant that the other party was extremely sensitive to anything or anyone related to the Freemasons. Li Yunxin knew that it was his slightly reckless probing that led to the current situation. Therefore he also knew why so few people knew about the existence of the Freemasons. Because just like in front of him, those who knew about it were almost all killed. First he killed the other party's parents and now he wanted to kill the other party's son. Li Yunxin raised his head. The wine pot turned into a thin line under the moonlight and went down his throat. Then he threw the wine pot away and sighed. "How can they bully people like this? How can I fucking tolerate this?" Chapter 145. In the residence of the Shangqing Danding sect in the city of Wei, the candles were lit for half an hour. Then the beggar stopped and said in silence, "So that's it." Yunzi looked at the beggar and sighed. "Old friend, you're hiding something from me. We've known each other for so long and we've done so many things together. In such a season, what else can you hide from me?" Usually, the beggar would lose his temper after hearing such words. But today he showed a rare smile and said to Yunzi, "Since we're old friends, you should know some things." Alas. He thought seriously and said, "Okay, or let me put it this way, after I leave here I'll go back to that place and kill that demon. If he's lucky he'll have a whole corpse and maybe I'll wear it. If he's unlucky he might not even have a piece of his body left. But no matter what, I must kill him. Do you know why?" Yunzi frowned. According to what you just said, his behavior, actions and speech are indeed the maid of that demon Bai Yunxin. She's a very important person in our plan, so why do you insist on killing her? "Because he asked me the questions you want to know." The beggar looked at Yunzi with a rare serious expression. This surprised the true state cultivator who was used to him being as childish and temperamental as a teenager. "You always like to ask me those questions and you like to ask me those questions in a roundabout way. But old friend, if I had not been so fond of you that I had carefully avoided those things, I would have been forced to kill you as I did today. A name, even if you know a name, it's a taboo." The beggar stood up in the candlelight and closed his eyes to feel for a while. Yes, she's still there. She was trapped by me. She asked me those questions just now and I told her all of them. Because I planned to kill her, she was like a dead person in my eyes. Even if I knew, I only knew for an hour. Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know. Yunzi frowned. Your sect really has such great power? Even Daotong and Kenzo can't protect you? You're a genius who practiced Taoism and swordsmanship at the same time, but your sect forced you to abandon your body and become a ghost. You really don't care about such hatred? We practice heavenly will dharma for immortality, but now you... No. The beggar interrupted him seriously. I don't hate. Old friend, I don't practice heavenly will dharma for immortality. We just want to save the world. From where? Yunzi's brows were still furrowed. He felt that the other party's words were ridiculous and stubborn. The world is currently under the control of the orthodoxy and the sword sect. The world belongs to the cultivators. What kind of disaster would need your sect to replace the orthodoxy and the sword sect to save it? The beggar stayed for a while and smiled, meaning Gof Chi, Taoist of sect of Daotong and Kenzo of Taoists. Of Qing of sect. Daotong and Kenzo are made up of cultivators. Moreover, are all these cultivators really cultivators from the orthodoxies and sword sects? Or maybe, thousands of years ago, even enlightened beings could occasionally listen to the teachings of the celestials and be taught the Dharma. Now, except for the two sages who claim they can listen to the teachings, is there anyone else, even if it's a profound realm cultivator, who can see the secrets of heaven? Why do you also believe this saying? Davis 5 decays, immortal's ascension is blocked, heaven no longer exists. People spread this saying everywhere every few thousand years. Yunzi waved his hand disdainfully. Only ignorant low-realm cultivators believe it. How can you believe it? That's not what I mean. The beggar sighed. Forget it. If we continue, the relationship between you and me will be in danger. It's time for me to take care of her. This was not the first time their conversation ended like this. Yunzi felt sorry for it, but he was not in a hurry. Therefore he changed the topic. If you want to do it, then do it. I can think of some ways to push the blame to the old Lord Dongting. But you were seriously injured in the battle with Li Chunfeng and his wife, and you don't have a suitable body now. Are you sure you can do it? Once he stopped talking about the Freemasonry, the beggar immediately returned to his original nature. He snorted disdainfully. That demon? You cultivators with bodies are not good-looking, but I, a wandering ghost, am good-looking. That demon is at the peak of the transcendent realm, but I don't know why she only has the strength of the emptiness realm. I think she was injured in the battle with Long Sun and Lu Ling. She is a demon, a real demon, the beggar said disdainfully. The beggar said disdainfully, demons don't cultivate in Dharmic Tao. Even if they have some innate abilities and Dharma spells, how can they be as profound as my Tianxing Dharma? Yunzi thought for a while and said, but you don't know what the demon's real body is. There are always variables. The beggar frowned. Does the demon know that my real body is a ghost? I gave up my body to deal with those things, so they thought that I was a ghost. But they don't know that I am a ghost cultivator, and I can also use the divine heart law. Even though I am seriously injured, I am still at the peak of the transcendent realm. I'm not afraid of her. In fact, Yunzi wasn't worried that the beggar would fail. Even though the beggar and the demon were both at the peak of the transcendent realm, the beggar knew the divine heart law. It was like two strong men fighting in a narrow alley. One of them was completely naked, while the other was fully armored, armed with a sturdy shield and a sharp sword. As long as the opponent wasn't mentally retarded, they would definitely win. He asked these questions again and again because he wanted to get some clues about the mysterious organization and sect behind the child beggar from the child beggar's answers. But the beggar didn't make any mistakes. He sighed and said, if that's the case, then go. Come back as soon as possible. Don't make too much noise and don't play tricks on her. If there are too many things, I won't be able to explain it. The beggar giggled and jumped out of the door. It took about half an hour to walk from the Danding Sect station in way to the Moonenju branch where Li Yunxin was. The beggar walked for a long time. As he walked, he looked at the pedestrians on the street to see if there was a body more suitable for him. The reason why he put on the beggar's clothes was because he was a good cultivator. If someone found him and taught him Tao, he might be able to become a cultivator at the middle level of the transcendent realm before he died. Unfortunately, after being pierced by the child beggar, her soul was nowhere to be found. It should have been taken away. His body was good, but only his potential was good. Speaking of fighting, he was not good enough. But the beggar couldn't find a more suitable body. Most of the people around at this time of the year were bandits who had lost themselves to wine and women. So he walked to the street where the Moonenju was. There was someone on the street. The beggar saw Li Yunxin holding a jar of wine in his hand. He was wearing a white robe and was drinking under the moonlight. When he saw the beggar, he smiled drunkenly. Do you want to drink wine under the moonlight? Chapter 146. The beggar or Qing Liangzhu frowned and said, "You are a monster. You know that I am coming to kill you and you can't escape. Why are you so calm now?" Li Yunxin smiled and said, "But how do you know that I can't escape? I am not waiting for you to fall into my trap." Qing Liangzhu put his hands behind his back and walked forward slowly. As he walked, he sensed the inhibition formation he set up on the street. As a true state cultivator, the inhibition formation set up by someone at the peak of the transcendent state was not easy to be broken. He believed that Yu Yunzi could break the restriction in half an hour with his artifact, but he didn't believe that a fiend demon could do it. However, monsters were cruel and cunning, and he had killed a powerful monster before. Therefore he believed that she was bluffing and plotting something. The inhibition formation he set up was still intact, and he knew that a small flow of Dharma power had broken through the inhibition formation. She must be trying to summon or contact something. Maybe she was trying to summon Bai Yunxin, but the flow of Dharma power didn't leave the city. Instead, it was lurking around the street. Qing Liangzhu didn't know where the monster got its confidence from. He decided to find the hidden chess piece of the monster. He stopped 10 steps away from Li Yunxin and waved his hands. The two ends of the street lit up with a misty green light. Then the two of them were sealed in this small section of the street by the fog on both sides. Neither sound nor light could get out, so he could do whatever he wanted. Therefore he said, "If you tell me more or kill yourself, I can leave your body intact." Li Yunxin thought for a while and asked, "Why do you want to kill me?" "Because you asked me something you shouldn't have." Qing Liangzhu said, "But that's not important. I will kill you sooner or later. I've taken a fancy to your demon body. I can't leave a body intact if the monster is too strong, and I don't want the monster that is too weak. You are at the peak of the transcendent state, but you only have the power of the emptiness state." See, I was right. "Sir, you talk a lot of nonsense. You have my style." Li Yunxin emptied the jar of wine, and with a flick of his hand, the jar rolled into the shadows below the steps. Qing Liangzi glanced out of the corner of his eye. There were already 7 or 8 jars piled up in the shadows. He was also a demon that loved to drink. Or perhaps he was using alcohol to boost his courage. Then he heard Li Yunxin say, "Then when you killed Li Chunfeng and his wife, did you also have the guts to talk so much nonsense?" Qing Liangzi frowned. "You were asking about Li Chunfeng and his wife just now, and you're still asking about them even when you're about to die. What do you want to know?" But Li Yunxin just smiled and waved his hand. Another jar of wine flew out from the inner hall of the southern wood house. He opened the mud seal and took another sip. He looked at Qing Liangzhi and smiled. "You told me everything when I asked you about the Freemasonry. Although I know you wanted to kill me a long time ago, you still talk too much nonsense. I say why you and I are in the same situation. I'm going crazy. You have a big secret in your heart, so you really want to find someone to tell it to. But if you find an ordinary person on the side of the road, they won't understand what you mean at all, so you feel that it's meaningless. But if you find someone who really understands, that's a bad thing. That person might leak the secret. So you're the same as me. Before you decide to kill a worthy opponent, you'll become a chatterbox and want to spill all your secrets." Qing Liangzi's expression turned ugly. "What a sharp-tongued demon. You're talking too much right now." Li Yunxin nodded happily. Yes. "I'm very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. You have to know, you're a knot in my heart. I couldn't understand other people's feelings in my previous life, and I still can't understand them in this life, but at least I can understand them. So I can understand what love is, and I can even feel that an old man is like someone I cared about in my previous life at some point, and I feel, heavens, and I really feel that I've fallen in love." Li Yunxin held the wine jar and frowned as he pondered for a moment. Then he tilted his head. "Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing?" "Personally, I think it's a good thing. I seem to have opened the door to a new world and experienced new feelings. And because of this, I just realized something else." Li Yunxin sighed. "Previously, I was born to a woman and then raised by this woman and that man for over 10 years. This is an experience I've never experienced in my previous life. I call this woman mother and that man father. Although I'm not a normal person, I feel happy when others treat me well. Sometimes I ask myself why, after coming to this world for so many years, I still remember things from the past. Why, when I speak, I always like to use words from that world. For example, right now, I really want to call you an idiot. Why?" Li Yunxin tossed the wine jar away and put his hands behind his back. He lowered his head and paced a few steps. I never thought about this before. But after seeing you tonight, I understand. This is one of my self-defense mechanisms. In my previous life, I experienced unimaginable darkness, and I also did unimaginable bad things. Just from the level of social civilization at that time, how tolerant those bad things were. Friend, when it comes to crime, I'm your ancestor. Therefore, I can't trust others, and I don't want to trust others. Then I came to this world with a clear memory. Then I felt what you call fatherly and motherly love. This feeling was very strong, very powerful. I was almost conquered by this feeling. I thought, well, it's not bad to live like this for the rest of my life. At that time I read fish play chess, right? Oh my God. I was simply a saint. But even during such days, I still stubbornly thought about the things and the way of life in my previous life. Because my psychological defense mechanism, my subconscious doesn't want me to trust anyone, and I don't want to have feelings for anyone. So they tried to isolate me from the real world, from the man, from the woman. The most direct way is to not forget the past. To think that I would be controlled by my own defense mechanism for so long. Only after meeting you tonight did I understand. Li Yunxin stood still and stopped pacing around. That is because they realized, oh my God. I actually have feelings for that man and that woman. This feeling could put me in danger. Thus, they don't want me to forget the past. Next he raised his head and looked at Qing Liangzi. I am really happy, friend. After meeting you today and finding out the truth I found out. I actually love them, I can really love them. I can actually feel that kind of feeling. Not for any purpose. Li Yunxin raised his hand and used a finger to rub the corner of his eye. Next he laughed and stretched out his hand, showing it to Qing Liangzi. I shed a tear for them. I can really love someone. Looking at Li Yunxin's damp fingertips under the moonlight, a chill. Qing Liangzi's back slowly rose. He suddenly felt an intense and sharp sense of danger, because of this madman standing before him. He looked like a madman. The cultivator frowned and slowly inhaled. You are not Bai Yunxin's maid. You are a madman. Who are you? Li Yunxin smiled and looked at him for a while. He finally realized, friend. I am indeed not Bai Yunxin's maid. I am indeed a madman. I am Li Yunxin. His smile suddenly disappeared in the darkness, and he stared at Qing Liangzi like a wild beast. My father is Li Chunfeng and my mother is Shangguanyu. You claimed that they were killed fair and square. Then tonight I will take revenge for the murder of my parents. Fair and square, I will crush you into a pile of dregs. Chapter 147. Qing Liangzhu had fought against great demons in the true state and killed cultivators who were at the peak of the transcendent state. The person in front of him who called himself Li Yunxin had the body of a yin god. He was at the peak of the transcendent state and had the strength of an emptiness state. Qing Liangzhu believed that he could not defeat him, but his heart was filled with alarm because of the words crushed into a pile of dregs. Because of this warning sign that had allowed him to turn defeat into victory in countless critical moments, the cultivator no longer had the time to ponder the other party's true identity. He only roared without hesitation, "In your mother's autumn dreams." After this shout, the cultivator slapped the back of his head and spat out a green light sword from his mouth. He grabbed it with his right hand and swung it diagonally. The light sword turned into a thin sword that shone with a cold light. Then Qing Liangzhu leaped forward and quickly wrote runes on the sword with his left hand. He shouted bravely, "I want to learn from Grandpa's Tao of dual cultivation." Normally it would be comical for an 11 or 12-year-old child beggar to shout like this. However, at this moment he crossed the 10 steps between them in an instant. At this moment he wrote 6 runes on the sword with his left hand. The sword was infused with mana and turned red like when it was taken out of the furnace. The red light moved and tore through the air. When it was about to pierce Li Yunxin's chest, there was a loud bang. With the point of contact as the center, a violent air wave and mist swept across the street, crushing the green stone slabs under their feet into fine powder. The stone powder, mist, and distorted air mixed together, and the long street was immediately covered in a cloud of white mist. However, there were sparks from the point where the tip of the sword touched Li Yunxin's body. It was as if steel was squeezing steel or iron was swallowing rocks. The air was heated up because of the fierce attack, and the mist was dispersed in the next moment, causing a second wave of even more intense air wave. It revealed Li Yunxin and Qing Liangzhu. In the blink of an eye, the cultivator took 10 steps forward and stabbed his sword into Li Yunxin's chest. At this moment where he had been standing, the dust that had been stirred up by his sudden and violent attack had yet to settle, but he had already stabbed 16 times consecutively at a point on Li Yunxin's left chest. This had already surpassed the limits of what the eyes of Daotong cultivators could capture. It was precisely because the 16 stabs overlapped and compressed the air in an instant that the second explosion occurred. It was also at this moment that Li Yunxin had the time to lower his head and take 3 steps back. Then he looked at his chest. Even his clothes were not torn. Qing Lizhu didn't chase after him either. That was because the 16 sword strikes just now were one of the killing moves of the Lin Su sword school of Kenzo, but they hadn't been able to injure him in the slightest. Li Yunxin raised his hand and dusted his clothes. He looked at him with a smile and shook his head. Fast enough but not strong enough, my friend. With this kind of ability, how could he kill my parents openly? Qing Liangzi slowly lowered his sword and pointed the tip of the sword to the ground. He snorted coldly, "It's just a test. Let's see what kind of ability you have. But you do have some tricks." Li Yunxin stood 3 steps away from him. He clasped his hands behind his back and smiled. "This method is very simple. It's because I made a painting of the Overlord's carapace, a rare scroll. It would be strange if you could break this painting with your insignificant strength at the peak of the transcendent stage." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his bosom. The paper was yellow papyrus used by Moon Enju to keep accounts. He had used a bald pen to hastily draw a picture scroll. But it still couldn't conceal the astonishing flow of spiritual power on it. Then Li Yunxin casually tore the picture to pieces. He threw it to the ground. "Since it's a method that I said, I won't use it a second time." Qing Liangzi's eyes widened because of this action. "You really are that Li Yunxin? Aren't you dead? And now you're a ghost cultivator. What kind of trick are you playing now? I'm going to crush you into dregs. Friend, why are you so forgetful?" Li Yunxin snorted in a low voice and looked at him with a smile. "I'll show you the methods that my parents taught me one by one. I'll let you know how stupid your so-called righteousness is to Taoist Donqing's so-called righteousness." Hearing this, Qing Liangzi was so angry that he laughed. He raised his head and looked at Li Yunxin. The thin sword in his hand trembled like a snake that was about to pounce and bite people. "You arrogant kid. You think you're great because you blocked my previous attack with a rare scroll. Now I'll show you what I'm really capable of." Qing Liangzi didn't move after saying this. But his body suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. His entire person seemed to have turned into a sun in an instant, illuminating the entire alley. It was in this golden light that Qing Liangzi shouted in a low voice, "Xianxia golden light method." At the same time, Qing Liangzi raised his left arm and wrote 3 words in the air with a drop of blood from the beggar's fingertip. Yang. Tai. Once the words were written, the mysterious power of the Daotong talisman immediately came out in response to the sky. Wherever the golden light reached in the alley, everything slowed down by half a beat. It was as if it had fallen into a sticky, stagnant and inescapable swamp of light. Beside Li Yunxin, a small light man suddenly formed in the air in the light. When it formed, it pulled out a sword and stabbed at Li Yunxin's chest. But Li Yunxin dodged this sword with a tilt of his body. The light grazed his left shoulder and shot into the ground. A small piece of soil instantly turned into bright red lava. But this was just the beginning. After the first light man appeared, more light men appeared one after another in the air around him. The golden sword light shot at him from all kinds of unimaginable angles like a storm. But Li Yunxin dodged them all. He was only 3 steps away from the cultivator, but he didn't try to fight with him. Because every cultivator knew that when a Daotong Taoist cast a spell, the most dangerous place was right in front of them. A powerful restriction would appear along with the talisman within 3 steps of them. Within those 3 steps, danger was everywhere. But in such a dangerous place, Li Yunxin's speed seemed to be faster than the golden assassin. He was so fast that his figure almost became a shadow in the crisscrossing golden light. The Daotong formula "lock the balcony" was specially used to subdue Yin spirits. In the vast golden light, it would slow down the opponent's speed and shock their mind. Coupled with the Xianxia golden light spell of Kenzo, It complemented each other. No one should be able to escape from this killer move. But at this moment, Li Yunxin was not affected by the restriction. He dodged like the wind. In the blink of an eye, he could change his position more than 10 times. In the next breath, not a single sword light could hit him. While Li Yunxin was dodging, she sneered in a calm and unruffled voice, "Strong enough but not fast enough, my friend. With this kind of ability, how could he kill my parents fair and square? You are now in the transcendent state. You can turn illusions into reality, but it is still different from the real state. I guess your golden light spell can last. 3, 2, 1, you can't hold it anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden light on the street suddenly disappeared. Darkness once again covered the battlefield. Li Yunxin closed his eyes for a while to get used to the darkness. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the beggar. Then he took out a papyrus drawing from his bosom and tore it apart. Guang Wang formation breaking painting. I am stronger and more agile than Guang Wang. But your sword light is not as sharp as the weapons of 100,000 soldiers. He smiled in the darkness. This is a painting. This painting was taught to me when I was 7 years old. Qing Lizhu no longer looked down on him. He realized that he had made a mistake. Li Yunxin was at the peak of the transcendent state and he was at the peak of the transcendent state. Qing Lizhu used to be in the real state, but now he was at the peak of the transcendent state. If he was also a Taoist or a swordsman, he could easily kill him. But the problem was, he was a Taoist painting master. He had been tricked by him earlier and had given him an hour to prepare. A well-prepared Taoist painting master stayed on the street for 2 hours. Qing Lizhu knew what was going on with the dozens of streams of spiritual energy that passed through the restriction he set up. It was Li Yunxin's ambush. Because during those 2 hours, Li Yunxin was well prepared and quickly closed the gap between the two of them. He was not an ordinary Taoist painting master, and he was not one of those useless painters worshipped by the Heavenly Cave sect. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the skills of a real Taoist painting master at the peak of the transcendent state. When he fought with Li Chunfeng and his wife, it was their souls that had transformed into their real bodies and fled thousands of miles away. That was a battle of pure cultivation, and they didn't use any of the skills of a Taoist painting master. Now Qing Lizhu knew what Li Yunxin meant when he said fair and square. His mistake was to compete with this Taoist priest Dan Qing who was well prepared. What Li Yunxin had prepared were all life-saving methods. It was obvious that he cherished his body very much. That meant he was very fragile. He was also a swordsman who practiced dual cultivation. The body of an expert at the peak of the transcendent realm was stronger than that of an expert at the emptiness realm. He should have continued to fight with the techniques of the sword sect after his first attack was blocked by Li Yunxin. He shouldn't have retreated 3 steps. At this moment Qing Lizhu heard Li Yunxin say in the darkness, "Since I've let you have 2 moves, it's my turn now. Don't cry when I beat you later." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yunxin pounced towards Qing Lizhu. Qing Lizhu laughed strangely and raised his sword to meet Li Yunxin. Good timing. At this moment, dark clouds covered the moon, and the long street was shrouded in darkness. However, darkness was not an obstacle for a powerful warrior. Airflow, sound, and temperature could all be used as guiding lights. When Qing Lizhu pounced, he had already written a talisman, a restriction 3 steps in front of him. If Li Yunxin pounced over, he would be entangled by this restriction for a while. Then he could. Suddenly, a faint golden light shone in front of him. With the help of this golden light, Qing Lizhu saw that Li Yunxin was actually ignoring the restriction 3 steps in front of him, and was charging straight towards him. And that faint light was the light of the restriction breaking one after another on his body. Qing Lizhu cursed inwardly, "What evil spirit did I do tonight? Why doesn't this Li Yunxin have the slightest bit of common sense?" But before he could think, Li Yunxin had already swung a barbaric fist. The fist was extremely powerful and heavy, heading straight for Qing Lizhu's face. With this strength, speed, and technique, even a peak expert of the secular world, a rare genius of the martial world, would be smashed into meat paste by this fist. But in Qing Lizhu's view, after tearing apart the Guang Wang formation breaking diagram, Li Yunxin's speed was laughably slow. He even had the time to think of several countermeasures in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. But in the end he decided to use the sword to directly meet the fist wind. Tonight he had enough of this Li Yunxin's humiliation and contempt, and his strength was clearly far above his opponent's. This kid was getting carried away. So he had to teach him a good lesson and let him know that Qing Liju's Kenzo Daoist technique was. He slanted his sword upwards. How? Then the sword vibrated. Incomparably sharp. It went straight for Li Yunxin's fist wind. Bang! Half of Qing Liju's face was almost smashed, and his entire body was sent flying. That sword of his had indeed pierced forward with full force. It went straight for Li Yunxin's fist wind, stabbing out 32 times in an instant. Stabbing his knuckles, wrist, eyes and 29 times at his heart. It only took a moment and the sword was infused with the full strength of a peak transcendent cultivator. Although this beggar's body was temporarily strengthened by spiritual power, it was already strong enough. Therefore the thing that Qing Liju didn't understand when he landed was, why didn't Li Yunxin die? The body of a ghost cultivator with the strength of an emptiness realm couldn't possibly withstand this kind of power. Although half of his head was smashed, he should have died. But after all, it was a possessed body controlled by a cultivator's soul. Qing Liju felt that this was his last fight, so he immediately jumped up from the ground, holding the broken sword and pouncing towards Li Yunxin. This time he didn't care about any tactics. Although being killed on the living body or knocked out of the body would consume his strength, Qing Liju now truly realized that if he didn't use all his strength to kill Li Yunxin tonight, there would be more trouble in the future. This kid is too strange. Not even once could he predict him. In the darkness of the long street, even more violent flames and fist wind burst out. After trembling intensely for 3 breaths, there was a short and uncontrollable scream. Bang! Qing Liju's body was hit to the ground again, and there was a bowl-sized bloody hole in his chest. The strong body, protected by the spiritual power of a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent realm, was actually pierced. The dark clouds that covered the moon finally dispersed. As for the dying child beggar, he finally understood why Li Yunxin was unscathed after being stabbed so many times by him, and why her body would even emit sparks when she was stabbed. Because the person standing in front of him was a being with the body of a devil, more than 10 feet tall. Ferocious red antlers on his head. Long hair as white as snow, like the mane of a male lion. His whole body was covered with black scales, and when he moved slightly, there was a sound of metal colliding. A pair of golden eyes had a thin black line, which was demonic and ferocious. A mouth full of sharp teeth like a beast slightly grinned and breathed out clouds and mist, saying to him, "Do you know that I used the city of Wei as a scroll to reconstruct my Dharmakaya? The streets and alleys of the city of Wei are like my meridians. Now that you are fighting with me in the city of Wei, it is like you are fighting with me in my body. You don't use the good Taoist method, but you have to fight with me, ha? Tell me, do you have a right to die?" That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.